For the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company.
At least I have the radio to keep me company.
On 93.5 and 107.5, The Fan.
So I would like to say to you, Brendan King, I would like to say to you, Eddie Garrison, that I came up with this epiphany. And the younger me would have probably done that.
Was this at 2 in the morning?
I actually went to bed. I had an early morning this morning, so I went to bed at like 1:30, but I had to get up at 7. But the younger me would have taken credit for this, but I don't know if you guys know this or not, but I am now far more mature. Ooh. I am basically like the philanthropic radio host, right? Like, listen, no credit to me. I want everybody else to get the love, okay? So somebody else sent this to me. My buddy Paul the mailman sent this to me. Paul Hurley, the greatest photographer, postal carrier in Indianapolis. But it's brilliant. He sent me the following text. Okay, this was sent to me before we went on the air about 15 or 20 minutes ago. And then I said to myself, I can't wait until we're on the air at noon so that I can share the brilliance of this text with the Indianapolis listening market. Okay? There have been 2 quarterbacks in 40 years for the Indianapolis Colts that have defeated the Pittsburgh Steelers. 2. They are, would you like to guess, Eddie Garrison, the first of the 2? There are 2 who have started games. The text says as the following. These two Indianapolis Colts are responsible for the entirety of wins in 40 years against the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Well, one of them...
They are 2-18.
One of them was on the pop quiz this morning with KB and Andy.
Oh.
And that would be the sheriff.
Okay, that is correct.
Peyton Manning.
That is correct.
In 2008.
Would you like to guess the other? The Butler Did It was the headline in the newspaper in the first year that the Colts beat the Steelers as the Indianapolis Colts because Ray Butler caught a tipped pass that won the game at the RCA Dome, then the Hoosier Dome, sending the crowd into a frenzy. Who was the starting quarterback? He came over on the Mayflower truck from Baltimore. He had played collegiately at Arizona State. He had played for Frank Kush, that was the head coach of the Colts.
Oh, boy.
His initials are the same as the leading receiver for the Colts this year.
We're doing MPJ or MJ?
Without the junior.
Okay.
Just MP.
Okay. Just making sure it wasn't like...
Mike Pagel is the only other quarterback.
Yeah,
both Mike Pagel and Peyton Manning, what do they have in common besides being the only 2 quarterbacks to have defeated the Pittsburgh Steelers while quarterbacking the Indianapolis Colts?
Do they both wear 18?
That is correct. So...
Good work.
Gardner Minshew, they need to lift the 18 retirement. Gardner Minshew, baby. Gardner Mania, put him in number 18, and let's get win number 4 against the Pittsburgh Steelers because the Colts need it badly, right? Because if you look at their schedule, they basically need to go. They probably 3-1 would probably get them in. 2-2 would put them on kind of thin ice. 1-3, they're on thin ice, and you can hear the all around the ice around them, and you can tell it's about to crack and getting into the AFC playoffs. But right now, if they go 3-1, I think they're in because they're at 10-6 or at 7-6. That'd put them at 10-7. That probably Brendan gets them in, right?
You would hope so, right?
Especially if those wins, like Pittsburgh, is the big one because when that ice starts cracking, if you're standing there with Pittsburgh, there's only one life preserver, right? And you cannot have lost to Pittsburgh because you lose the first tiebreaker there. So they've got to beat Pittsburgh. With Mitchell Trubisky, and no Kenny Pickett, his little hands, he's not going to be here. So you have to beat Mitchell Trubisky and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So why not then guarantee yourself victory, or at least certainly help it, by having Gardner Minshew go out and wear number 18?
I think it's foolproof.
See, these are the things that I'm trying to do to help out this community and the football fans of Central Indiana.
Well, you've actually done multiple things over the last 24 hours. I mean, you asked the question to Dustin Dopirak. Did I get that right?
Yes.
I'm 1 for 1, Jake.
Dopirak, yep.
You asked the question to him yesterday about Ben Mathurin, and he goes out and drops 30 last night. So you are helping the Indianapolis community.
So last night, here's what the Pacers did. You guys ever hit the snooze button?
Yep.
How many
Did
times
today.
on average do you hit the snooze button?
I hit it 3 times
Many.
today.
Really?
I did.
Now, here's the thing. I'm assuming when I say snooze button, you're using your phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean that when you hit the snooze button, you let it go all the way to the alarm again, and then you hit it, or you looked at it and you're like, there's 2 minutes left, I'm going to extend ahead of time?
So my alarm is set to go off, I think, at like 8:30, and then I snoozed it once it went off. And then I think it goes off another 10 minutes, snoozed it again, snoozed it again.
You know, you can just set for the different times ahead of time, right?
See,
like when I did the morning show, I had it set for 3 different times in case I slept through 2 of them.
Here's
I
the
set
problem.
a million alarms.
Here's the problem. If I do that, I will physically not get out of bed until the third one,
No.
and then at the third time, I'm like, ugh, I got to get up.
Do you know what my grandfather did, like back in the day, like in the early 30s? My grandfather, he told me this. Now, maybe this is some wives' tale, and everybody's grandfather did this. I don't know.
He had a rooster, and it woke him up at...
Close. There's a rooster right
Cockatoo
next
will
to.
do.
There's a rooster right next to Grand Park, literally right
Yes.
across from the Colts practice facility. And when I was going to do the morning show,
I remember that.
he was the one fella. He was basically heckling us. My grandfather had it set up, had his clock set up in such a way that it was attached to his record playing stereo,
Oh.
so that when the hand hit a certain mark, it would turn on the record playing stereo on the other side of the room. So he had to physically get up out of bed to walk across and turn the stereo off.
Smart.
But then he was
Yeah.
awake.
Smart.
Because you're right. You got it right next to you on the. You're like, okay, you just go right back to sleep. But at any rate, the Pacers could have hit the snooze button last night in Detroit. They're taking on a team in the Pistons that was looking for to avoid a 20th consecutive loss. They go up there, and if you heard Rick Carlisle on this morning with KB and Andy, you know, he had made the point of the fact that Benedict Mathurin continues to earn minutes. I think at the beginning of the year with Benedict Mathurin that we were kind of thinking that Mathurin was just going to simply have like minutes not handed to him, but that they were ready for him to become the running mate with Tyrese Halliburton. And I've seen people say, and I'm not saying that it's incorrect, that Buddy Hield is perhaps limiting that progression for Benedict Mathurin. It would make sense because obviously you're taking minutes away from Mathurin. But I think at the beginning of the year, maybe there was the thought of Mathurin's getting these minutes, but yet he hasn't necessarily completely in totality of season, quote unquote, earned those minutes. So they scaled it back a little bit. And now when he's out there, he knows that he's got to produce right away. And he's done that. I mean, especially the last few games. What I liked about Mathurin in the Laker game was, you know, he never lost that drive killer mentality. Like, he definitely has a competitive nature in him where he's not afraid and he gets kind of angry and plays angry sometimes, which can be a good and bad thing. But last night he was really good, to your point, Brendan. And that was one of those games that was kind of a no-win situation because if you beat Detroit, you're supposed to beat Detroit.
Yeah.
But it would have been a disaster had they lost. So kudos to them with that quick turnaround kind of and coming off of everything that was going on in Vegas and going into Detroit. Had all the makings for a snooze button game, and yet they answered the bell.
20 straight losses for Detroit. You have to feel for the people of Michigan because I don't know if you saw this, Eddie. When the Pistons win, fans get 5 free wings from Wingstop.
Ooh.
And that's 2 wins. You do the math. That's 10 wings on the year, guys.
Uh-huh.
That's tough.
Wow, are you serious?
Yeah.
They get anytime they win, they get 5 free wings?
5
Yeah.
free wings.
With a ticket, right?
I don't know exactly what it was, but still.
It's the longest losing streak in a season in NBA history.
It ties, doesn't it? I thought it tied it.
See, that was the longest losing streak in franchise history, but it spanned over 2 seasons.
Gotcha.
It didn't all 21 didn't happen consecutively in the same
was it
season.
the Houston Rockets? I thought the Rockets had a year where they lost 21 straight. 20 or 21 straight.
Let me double check, but I'm pretty
I
sure
mean,
that's
those
factoid.
Bobcats teams were terrible. I mean, they were eligible.
The interesting thing about Detroit is that they have talent. It's just young talent. I mean, they've had good picks. You got Jaden Ivey. You got Cunningham's a really good player. It's just going to take some time, obviously. And then the other thing, too, that you just don't know is you can get really good players, but it doesn't mean that they always mesh together. And likewise, you can have NBA teams and basketball teams in general are like jigsaw puzzles. You know, sometimes you look at it and the pieces look weird, but then when they all come together, you're like, you know what? I get it now. It's like that 3D imaging art that was big for 18 months in the 90s. Like you stare and you stare and you stare at it and you're like, I don't get it. And then when it comes together, you can never unsee it and you're like, it totally makes sense now.
I take that back. It's franchise history, not NBA history. The longest losing streak in NBA history in one season was in 2010, the 2011 season, and in the 13-14 season. Would you like to guess the teams?
Well, the Houston Rockets was one, was it not?
No.
One of them
Okay.
was the Bobcats.
No.
What?
Okay, so who was it?
2010-2011 season was the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Wow.
2013-2014, trust the process.
Oh, that's right.
76ers.
Philadelphia,
Yeah.
Okay. But nonetheless, you know, and it's one thing if you know you have a bad team and you're just almost like positioning for, but that's not the case with Detroit. I mean, Detroit's trying to build, right?
That was 26 consecutive losses in one season.
That's rough.
That's tough. I mean, talk about going from the top to the bottom, too. Their coach. I totally forgot Monty Williams is their coach.
People started going to the Sixers games that year just on a hunger strike, right? Like if you were trying to lose weight, then you went to the Sixers game if they were giving out free wings per win because you went like 2.5 months without eating. That's a bit rough.
Enjoy your 10 wings, Detroit.
They really get so, you know, I'd like to know this. If you go to a Pacer game and during the course of a Pacer game, the opponent misses 2 consecutive free throws.
Right.
You get free fries from Arby's, right? And that's why the Pacemates stand in the background and they're waving the Arby's fries sign. And it happens more often than you think. And if you go to the game, you get an email the next day that's like, go Pacers. Like, here's, you know, don't forget to go to Arby's. How many people actually, it's great promotion for Arby's because how many people take advantage of that, you think? The curly fries at Arby's are fabulous, don't get me wrong.
I think the best promo that the Pacers have, though, is whenever they win, you get a buy one, get one free sub. Or not sub, but at Penn Station.
Rick Carlisle does that commercial.
Indeed, he does.
It's inspiring.
But you have to have a ticket, right?
I
not
know.
for
You
that.
just have to text.
That's right. You text
text
right.
a certain
That's
number.
Right.
Yeah,
That's right. The Arby's one, you have to
correct.
show
That
your
one,
ticket
yeah,
and you
right.
get it. And then, of course, as I've mentioned a gabillion times on radio, you could be like, I don't know if I should confess to this. What's the statute of limitations, you think, on poor judgment or non-scrupulous behavior?
Like saying it on the radio?
Yeah.
Well, you're the host of the show.
Should I just say that this might have been somebody else that did this? I've mentioned it before. When I was
just talking to the third person.
when I was in college, I heard about a guy in college. That went to go see a Colts game and bought tickets in the upper deck because he was in college, didn't have a lot of money, but his buddy was from the city that was playing against the Colts, so they bought tickets in the upper deck of the Hoosier Dome. And like in the mid third quarter, one of the larger pizza chains in town said, congratulations, if you are sitting in row blank in section blank, you've won a free pizza. And my buddy apparently was sitting right on the aisle, and it was their row. It's like, oh my gosh, awesome. And then a representative came and handed a large stack of the free pizza coupons and said, take one and move it all the way down the aisle. And my buddy supposedly then said to his buddy, like, you know what, we should leave. And they had free pizza for like 2 years. I'm just saying, like, I heard
now,
about
did
that.
you watch Jeopardy? Well, you did that on the first run or the second run while having the free
You
pizza.
love that Jeopardy story, don't you?
I know. Like
Brendan, I
bringing it
used to
back
watch
every now and
Jeopardy at 4 o'clock in the Topeka market when I was at University of Kansas, and then it came on again at like 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in Kansas City. So while I would skip class, and while everybody was away at class, I would watch Jeopardy on the Topeka market. And then when everybody would come back from class, we'd be watching it, and I'd be like, what is the Magna Carta? And they're like, how in the world does Corey know all this stuff? I was the Ken Jennings of the University of Kansas, right?
By the way,
back.
I couldn't help but notice your shirt. A lot of Pacer legends on that, including one who's
You
not
like
doing
this?
so well right now.
This shirt
unfortunately.
is from GOAT, which is the greatest of all tees, is the name of the company.
Oh, nice.
And they do this for basically any franchise, any team. They probably have a Cubs one that says like Sandberg, Dawson, Banks, you know. So this one is for the Pacers, and it says Miller and McGinnis and O'Neal and Smits and Person and Davis and Kellogg. Of course, the Davis could be either one. George McGinnis, in fact, I think most people know this by now. George McGinnis is in a serious health situation currently. He had a health episode I believe it was either the end of last week or the beginning of this week. My days all run together. I believe it was the end of last week. But he is in very serious condition, hospitalized in Indianapolis. And George McGinnis is, I was talking to Mark Monteith about this, and Mark makes this point, which is such a good one. When you talk about basketball legends in Indiana, obviously you kind of break it into tiers because you have your high school legends, you have your college legends, you have your professional legends. Your high school legends, Bobby Plump is a legend in Indiana. Larry Bird is a collegiate and professional legend in Indiana, but his high school days at Springs Valley, most people that would tell you they remember that or remember him being on the 74 All-Star team would be disingenuous or embellishing a little bit because he was not a huge on-the-radar guy. That's part of his charm and story for sure. Steve Alford was a great high school and college player that then had a cup of coffee in the NBA for a couple of years with Dallas and Golden State, etc. George McGinnis, with the exception of Oscar Robertson, George McGinnis is the most dominant basketball career of any player coming out of an Indianapolis high school all time. He was an amazing player at Washington. In 1969, Washington, even though Steve Downing, his teammate, was the one that hit ultimately the game-winning shot against Marion in the 69 semifinals, the morning game at Butler Fieldhouse, now Hinkle Fieldhouse, in order to advance to take on Gary Tolliston in the state championship in 1969. McGinnis was the star of that team. He had 27. He set the record for the most points in a Final Four, and for a semi-state and state, I think he had 148 points in 4 games. McGinnis then went on to Indiana, where, of course, freshmen were ineligible. But in his sophomore year at Indiana, he averaged 30 points a game. It is still the largest single-season scoring average in Indiana University history. He is the only player in the history of Indiana University to average 30 points for a season. And then, of course, he went into the ABA, playing for the Pacers, helping the Pacers to multiple ABA championships, and then the Philadelphia 76ers had drafted his rights, so he ultimately moved over to Philadelphia, where he was the co-MVP along with Julius Erving for the Sixers for the NBA itself, went to the NBA Finals, and interestingly enough, he then went to the Denver Nuggets, and the Pacers had a young guard from the University of South Carolina. The Denver Nuggets had an assistant coach who had coached that guard at South Carolina and had convinced the management of the Nuggets, look, this guy that's in Indiana is going to be a player. He's going to be a great scorer, and we need him here in Denver. So they called up the Pacers and said, we really want that young guard out of South Carolina, and we have a legend and a forward here that still has some game left in him in George McGinnis. We will trade you George McGinnis for Alex English. And they made that trade. And so George McGinnis was traded back to the Pacers. Alex English went to the Nuggets, where he scored more points in the 80s than any player in the NBA. The assistant coach then went to Indiana, became the general manager, and it was Donnie Walsh, who was an assistant for Larry Brown at Denver at the time and wanted Alex English to come to Denver. But McGinnis finished his career here, and then he went into business here in Indianapolis. And, his wife just passed a year or two ago, I think maybe a year ago, shortly after his mother had. But I've never met anybody, and look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I knew George McGinnis, or know, I should say, George McGinnis really well. But the few meetings that I had with him, because we knew mutual people, he treated and acted like I had been at Washington as the class of 70 or 69 or 68, and just was a gentle giant when he was out in the community, and still is to this day somebody that people would, stop by and go to his house. And he is absolutely just one of those radiant personalities that is larger than life in terms of his generosity and friendliness to people. I just think that, he is somebody that when anybody talks about him, they say what a nice guy he is. So he is hospitalized, I believe, on the north side of Indianapolis, and we certainly hope and wish for the best for George McGinnis. But one of the great sports icons and legends in central Indiana, zero question about that. One of the great careers, without a doubt. Last night I was confused, Brendan and Eddie, for this reason. And maybe one of the two of you knows the answer to this. I'm counting on you, Brendan, to know this answer.
Hit me.
I mean, I think I kind of know the answer, but I don't know officially. Why were there 2 Monday night games last night?
Has that kind of become the new
I wondered
standard,
about that.
right?
Like towards the end of the year? I mean,
Yeah,
at the
like-
beginning of the year, they're always on the opening Monday night, there's usually 2 games, right?
I feel like there's always one now the week or 2 weeks before Christmas.
I think it's because Christmas is on Monday and they're not going to. Is that it? They don't have. Do they not have a game scheduled for Monday night on Christmas night?
Let's find out.
Does the NBA kind of take over that? I didn't know if maybe
I
they
do
were
love
doing
Christmas
it that way.
football.
I'm trying to think of. There's always a bowl game on Christmas Day. I don't
Yeah.
ever remember NFL games on Christmas Day, right?
Well, I mean, I remember the Colts played in the desert in the Carson
But
Wentz
that was
year,
Christmas Eve, wasn't it?
They
That
have
was
3
Christmas Day.
football games
Was it
on
Christmas Day?
Christmas.
Right? There is.
Okay,
yeah.
so why is there not a Monday night game on Christmas? Is there a Monday night game?
There's
There is.
3 of
So
them.
why were there 2 Monday night games last night?
No idea. It's all part of the new
Scheduling
schedule.
snafu. But yeah, you got
Now, I caught a lot of heat when I said this. Granted, if it's a late afternoon game, then that's different. What's the first game on Christmas Day, Eddie?
The very first game on Christmas Day,
Yes.
it is. Oh, I just had it up. Dang
it is the Raiders and the Chiefs.
Thank
1
you.
o'clock.
Where is the game?
Kansas City.
What time's it kick?
1 o'clock.
Okay, see, to me personally, zero chance that I would sacrifice being with my family on Christmas morning to go to an NFL game. Zero chance.
Oh, that early for sure.
Yeah.
But it's a triple header.
I would say by 4 o'clock, you're pretty safe, right? Because by
Yeah.
then you're kind of winding down. But I'm sorry, especially if you are somebody with a family and with young kids.
Agreed.
You need to be with your family on Christmas morning, opening gifts, still in your PJs at noon. I mean, Christmas is the ultimate day of like family time. And maybe it's just because I'm older. And so now I've reached the age where you realize that there have been years where people from your family from the Christmas the year before are no longer there. And so you're like, I have to take advantage of this. And that's going to mean far more to me in 20 years than a game against the Kansas City Chiefs and the Raiders at Arrowhead. It just is.
Tell you what, Swifty's going to lose their mind if Taylor's there.
I was about to say inversely, though. Don't you think it's kind of cool that maybe a kid wakes up Christmas morning and they get tickets to go see the Chiefs play? I mean, here's a Christmas where you get to go see Patrick Mahomes and Travis
If
Kelce.
it's the only time that they ever get a chance, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But I think most kids, to be honest with you, even the most diehard of sports fans, Christmas is the one magical time of waking up and seeing the gifts. You want to be around. You want to play with your new toys, and you want to be around in your new pajamas. And I know not every kid has that. I get it, Eddie. I get it.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about as an adult.
Right.
I mean, as an adult, especially if you are a parent, I don't even have kids, but I can't imagine telling my kids at like 10:30 on Christmas morning, like, well, I'd love to stay and help you put together your big wheel, but unfortunately, the boys and I are tailgating out at Arrowhead. I mean, I just can't imagine that going over well.
They did get it right, though, with the night game, I will say. The game between Raiders, Chiefs is Giants, Eagles, but the nightcap
Yeah.
could be a Super Bowl preview. Ravens, 49ers.
Which one is it?
Raiders, 49ers is the nightcap on Christmas.
Ravens.
Could be Ravens.
I was going to say
49ers.
Raiders. I'm
I
like,
don't know why I said Raiders.
Raiders are playing twice.
Yeah.
They suck so bad
Sorry.
they're playing twice,
Yeah.
right?
But yeah, Super Bowl preview possibly. Ravens, 49ers, Christmas night, 8:15, ESPN.
Yeah, that's and you know what? Do you remember what happened the last time they played?
The lights went out.
Yeah, so
Beyonce performed.
So
That's
they could actually have the Ravens and the Niners play in a Super Bowl and then have everybody turn out their Christmas lights like at 11 p.m., right? Perfectly fitting. By the way, last thing, and then we'll get back into sports, I promise. Matter of fact,
This wasn't
Stephen
sports?
Holder going to join us at 1 o'clock. Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Stephen Holder going to join us 1 o'clock today. We'll talk about the Colts. Alex Golden going to join us at 2 o'clock for a little Pacers conversation on this Tuesday. How are you? Jimmy's still over in London. My name is Jake Query. You just heard from Brendan King and Brendan. I almost said Brendan Cook again. Brendan King and Eddie Garrison here on Query and Company on this Tuesday. So we got a Christmas tree. Shannon got it. I didn't get it. But Shannon got a Christmas tree fairly pricey. Do you guys do real or fake tree?
We
Fake.
always, growing up, we did real.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then we bought a fake one.
So Shannon went and got a very pricey real tree. And we put
She
it in.
chopped it down by herself?
Well, she didn't chop it down, but she did go to the farm, right? And they have them there. And a beautiful tree. And literally, like 4 days in now, it's completely wilted, falling apart, and like there's needles everywhere, and it's not taking any. I mean, I realize the roots aren't there, but it's taking no water, whatever. And now I think it's a fire hazard. So now she's contemplating punting on the whole thing, taking the whole thing down, going out, getting an artificial tree, putting it up, and then redoing all the decorations just for the safety of the house.
Well, actually,
that seems like an okay plan, right?
my first concern actually goes to your cat.
Cat lives with me.
Yeah.
Trees at
so
her
you're
house.
good. All right,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
he's good.
But doesn't she have a pet?
She has two. That'd be Kobe and Joey, but
That's
they're
right.
very on top of things. Matter of fact, I'm not going to lie to you. Kobe, a golden retriever, I think he's smoking meth in the basement anyway.
What is
So
Joey?
they're used to the smoke.
What's
that?
Joey?
He's a chug.
A
what?
chug?
Yeah, he's a chug. That's a half Chihuahua, half pug.
Really?
I think he's mostly pug, but
Huh.
he's just chill.
I didn't know that was.
See, my Joey
He's
is
a chill pug.
My Joey is a mini Australian Shepherd cattle dog.
He's a psychopath.
He is indeed.
Does he blue?
He is black, gray, white.
So when you go to Outback Steakhouse, does he corral everybody in together into perfect unison?
Well, I honestly say I've never taken him there, and I haven't been there since we've taken him home with us.
Okay, fair enough. We come back. We will talk actually about what happened in the NFL last night, but more specifically, how the AFC picture is shaping up for the Colts and what is happening in terms of their preparation now for the Pittsburgh Steelers, because it is a big one. We'll do that on the other side, and Stephen Holder at 1 o'clock as well. You're listening on a Tuesday to Query & Company here on 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. If you were to look over the AFC, that's the American Football Conference. By the way, Scotty Johnson just came in to explain to me the 2 Monday Night Football game deal and why it's played then, and I'm more confused now than I was before. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but I flunked algebra and geometry thrice and algebra 7 times. And then I got a tutor, and it helped me through it. But in terms of this other stuff, you can actually see. If you look closely, Brendan, you might see. Do you see anything there strange on the left side?
That's smoke.
No, it's part of my medulla oblongata that's melting out of my ear due to Scotty explaining to me the Week 18 playoff scheduling and why there's no Monday night game. But if you look at the NFL, one thing I can do is look at the NFL standings right now and realize that there is a massive logjam. Now, let me give you the teams that would be in contention for the wild card along with the Indianapolis Colts. That would be the Cleveland Browns, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Houston Texans, and the Denver Broncos. There are a couple now that are like within, like if a million things happen, but for the most part, that's what we're talking about. Now, among those, the team that you feel like right now is playing their best, just by the eye test, Brendan King, the teams in the AFC right now that Indianapolis, they're all sitting right now in the right lane. And there's a big sign up ahead that says, right lane ends. You got to merge over. And you're waiting for people to wave you in, right? And Jacksonville is sitting there begging people to move into their lane.
Yeah.
They're begging them, right? But if you look at the teams that are right there with the Colts in contention for the wild card, which one to the eye test to you, Brendan, and I'll ask you first. Cleveland's 8-5, but it feels like they're still kind of hanging on. Because how long can Joe Flacco do this, right?
Yeah.
But let me give you the teams again, and then I want you to tell me which one you find to be, you think of as the most dangerous. Like if this was Survivor, and you could vote a team off the island, and you're that Rupert fella in your tie-dye, so you know how to do it, and you're strategic, and you're going to vote off the one that's the biggest threat to you. You can vote off Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Houston, Denver, Cincinnati, Buffalo. I forgot Buffalo. Which of those are you voting off?
And the last one you said is what immediately came to mind because, something that Chap talked about yesterday when we had him on is if they get in, Josh Allen's playing without.
You're talking about Buffalo, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's the problem. So that's who you're going to take,
Buffalo's
right?
my answer.
Okay. Now, Buffalo's remaining schedule. Buffalo's remaining schedule is Dallas, at the Chargers, New England at home, and at Miami. 2 of those. This Sunday is huge for Buffalo.
Massive.
Huge. Because you would think that against the Chargers and the Patriots, they got a pretty good chance. But if you put yourself in a position where you lose this game and then you got to win out and you finish at Miami, your hope there is that Miami has everything clenched and is resting people and can't move their seed. That's a possibility for Buffalo. But still, remaining schedule for Buffalo is such that if I'm playing Survivor and I'm going strategically in terms of who I can just have eliminated, I'm not so sure that Buffalo is who I'd pick, but I get what you're saying. Totally understand what you're saying. Eddie, your team would be which?
I was also going to go with Buffalo, even though Buffalo was the team that I predicted would miss the playoffs going into the season. I just think that offense has looked much differently ever since they fired Ken Dorsey. Josh Allen looks more comfortable. They're getting the run game going a little bit more. They're not solely relying on Josh Allen to win with his right arm, so I would tend to go with Buffalo here.
But Buffalo's off the offering here because Brendan took him. Yours would be who? Again, I'll read them off to you. Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Houston, Denver, Cincinnati.
I'd probably go Denver.
Okay. I don't disagree with you. Denver 7-6. Thing about Denver, all of a sudden, and we had Brandon Cristal on from Denver a couple of weeks ago when the Broncos were struggling, and he's like, look, there's still faith that Sean Payton and Russell Wilson can get this figured out. And you thought to yourself, I don't know, Russell Wilson's like getting older. It seems like he kind of fell off a cliff. Sean Payton, I'm not sure what's going on there. He once flew on the same flight as Jake, and Jake was in first class because he got bumped up, and Sean Payton was in coach. How good a coach can he be? Okay, but remaining schedule for the Broncos. At Detroit.
Struggling.
Needs a win, right?
Yeah.
But it's at Detroit. Patriots at home. Chargers at Raiders.
So the same weeks 2 and 3 in the last 4 as Buffalo.
Correct. And then, but that's sandwiched between, again, At Detroit is huge for Denver because, and keep in mind, I mean, Denver's won, 6 of their last 7?
Yeah.
With that loss being to the Texans at Houston. But if they can get past Detroit, then all of a sudden they probably feel pretty good about it because you're going into Patriots, Chargers, Raiders.
And even more so, it was just announced as we were going on the air, Justin Herbert's out for the year. So he's done.
So that again, and the Chargers in general, though, even with Herbert,
they're
5-8, right?
But still, I mean, there's your one piece. And he was at least getting the ball
so
to
for
Keenan
the
Allen.
Colts, the point of the exercise is this. There are teams there, Denver being one of them, where schedule is advantageous for them. Buffalo is probably the most naturally talented roster of those that are in contention, but the schedule could help out the Colts in that regard. Then you get to, and this is what's interesting, you've left now Cincinnati, Houston, Pittsburgh, Cleveland. The Colts are in trouble with the Browns because they lost to them, and there's the first tiebreaker, right? And they're a game behind them right now. Cincinnati. You need help because Cincinnati's tied with you, but first tiebreaker, Bengals won the head-to-head. You look at Cincinnati's remaining schedule, okay? Cincinnati's remaining schedule, Minnesota, pretty doable, one would think, right?
Yeah, now Jefferson's hurt again.
At Pittsburgh, so you get a little bit of cannibalizing there that helps you out. At Kansas City, and then Cleveland. So there's some cannibalization that takes place there. Does Cincinnati always finish with Cleveland, by the way?
I feel like they do.
The very first NFL game I ever went to was Browns and Bengals in 1979. It was like 15 degrees out. And I'm watching
Cincy?
In Cincy at Riverfront. My dad was like, we're finally going to go to an NFL game. We went down and I watched the battle between, I think it was probably Forrest Gregg's Cincinnati Bengals led by Ken Anderson and the fighting Brian Sipes of Sam Ritigliano and the Cleveland Browns. And I loved every single second of it. To your point, Eddie, as a kid, I mean, I loved every second of it because I was at an NFL game. But I also wasn't still in the glow of new toys that I just opened from Christmas, for what that's worth. Hey, Jake, Colts have the tiebreaker over the Bengals. I don't think that's correct, right? Isn't the first tiebreaker head-to-head?
Correct. But since there is such a logjam right now with 7 and 6 teams, the Colts are higher because of their record within the AFC.
But if it came down to equal record at the finality of the season, if there was one spot and it became between the Colts and the Bengals and they were the exact same record, the Bengals would win that tiebreaker.
Si, senor.
Because the Bengals won the head-to-head. That's the first tiebreaker. Second tiebreaker would be conference record. Third tiebreaker would be divisional record. Then it comes down to head-to-head, right? And then it comes down to like internal AFC record, head-to-head, and then total points.
Division conference, right?
No, it's conference and division.
Yeah.
So first tiebreaker, head-to-head.
Yep.
Let's say the two teams didn't play each other or they played and they tied. Second tiebreaker, AFC record. If both teams are an equal record in the AFC, third tiebreaker, record within their own division.
Mm-hmm.
If, in fact, they have that.
Coin flip.
Fourth tiebreaker, I believe, then becomes point differential, followed by, I think, strength of schedule. I forgot that one.
Is it strength of schedule or strength of wins or something like that?
Yeah, like strength
of victory.
Yeah, which is kind of the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Like how many quality wins do you have? And then the last one that it comes down to, maybe like total number of points. I mean, at that point, it is infantile percentage that you're dealing with that. And then after that, this is the amazing thing. The radio host of each respective city, they have a water chugging contest, which can be dangerous.
Ooh.
You know that, right?
Yeah.
Water, not a...
Yes.
Water chugging contest.
Okay.
They had a...
H2O.
They had an unfortunate situation with a water chugging contest at a radio station years ago with listeners. And I'm not kidding. Like, I think people lost their job over it because it did not go well. I'll just say that.
Yikes.
It was tragic.
Well, I mean, thank God it's not a beer chugging contest and the Colts are not in the NFC North. You know?
Can you imagine the beer chugging contest and it's
Green
the
Bay?
Packers?
Good luck.
They've just automatically given it to Green Bay. They're in, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, all those tiebreakers are, this has nothing to do with the NFL. Not even close. But last night, my friend's fantasy football league that I'm in, the last playoff spot came down to the fourth tiebreaker, which is point differential.
when you're starting, you mean between two teams?
Yeah. For two of my buddies, one of them got into the fantasy football playoffs because it came down to point differential.
They're already in the playoff right now?
We're going to the playoffs next week in fantasy.
Okay.
I was the number one seed, by the way.
They had to redo that because in the early years of fantasy football, no one had thought that ahead of time.
Right.
And the problem is people had, Peyton Manning or, Priest Holmes or whatever else, and Terrell Davis, and these players were getting into Week 16 and they were resting them all out. And so people are like, wait a minute. So now they have to do it that way, Brendan, because if you have a player, and that's what's interesting. Listen, the NFL has been set up for years. For years. Here's why the NFL is the 800-pound gorilla. And I've spelled this out before, but I'll spell it again. Okay? There are four, that the NFL is the 800-pound gorilla. In no particular order. But we could probably do it chronologically. The first was gambling.
Yeah.
Before it was legalized gambling with all of the apps in most states, people have been gambling since the beginning of time, right? So gambling gave interest to people that otherwise didn't have an interest in the game between the Vikings and the Cardinals.
Yeah, the cavemen were betting on water chugging contests.
Correct. That's exactly correct, right? The second thing that made the NFL the 800-pound gorilla, aside from the fact that in the initial years, the scheduling was such that it was basically one day of the week. But you already had, so the guys that were gambling on it and had been watching it because it was every Sunday and that was the day that they got together and they were in their man cave, whatever else. But in order to make it in totality the popularity, people listening to my voice right now that 15 years ago were not diehard NFL fans, probably one of two things has gone into factoring why they are now big fans of the NFL. One of those is fantasy football. Well, I didn't really like fantasy football, and then Bill in accounting set up a league, and I got in it, and boy, it turned out to be really fun, and now all of a sudden I had a reason to watch games because I had Larry Fitzgerald as my third receiver. Okay? The other was they brilliantly incorporated women, and I don't mean that condescendingly. I mean that men who forever had their man cave and the wife was like, why are you watching games all day on Sunday? And then all of a sudden they came out and women started playing in fantasy football and enjoying that. So then they started marketing things towards women, pink jerseys, things like, gear and paraphernalia for women. And so women became a fan of the NFL because it gave them something that they could do with their husbands, and people began to watch games and go to games together. And then the last thing, which probably was the one that started the first, but is only in the last handful of years really cemented itself, and that is an orchestrated effort by the league to create league parity. Not parity, parity, P-A-R-I-T-Y. An equal footing for nearly every franchise. Baseball, Brendan, you love baseball, right?
Yes.
And you love the Cubs.
Yep. And
for the most part in your lifetime, certainly in your adult years, the Cubs have been competitive.
Most of the time. Very, very little when I was a kid, but yeah.
But for the most part, they were not the inept franchise that most people grew up with.
They were not the lovable losers. They were spending. They were spending.
From 1910 to 1984, people that were Cubs fans, there was no greater time of year than spring training because hope springs eternal, and that was the year when pitchers and catchers reported, this is the year of the Cubs, this is the year of the Reds, this is the year of the Twins, when in reality, every year, it's the year of the Yankees, the year of the Red Sox, the year of the Dodgers, right? In totality, I'm saying. But that hope for Major League Baseball franchises is what draws in fans. It's what makes opening day in Cincinnati electric and a parade and people dressed up, going crazy. In the NFL, they so strongly desired to have any given Sunday become a reality. And what they wanted more than anything else is exactly what you're seeing. And that's a traffic jam of 7 and 6 teams. Some can say, as I have at times, it's a vat of mediocrity, but it's also equal footing where every single Sunday into late November, early December, whatever else, you still feel on Sunday, I got to watch a game because my team, they could win. They could win. It's not the years of, I've got to go to the Colts game because Zoop is lifting tractors out front and Ray Compton is like juggling swords on Capitol Avenue because there's a chance if Mike Pagel has a great game that they might come within 17 points of Dan Marino and the Dolphins and the 25,000 Mark Clayton jerseys inside the Hoosier Dome, which is what it once was, right? But now it is. This is exactly what the NFL wants, and you can look at it one of two ways. You can say that it is frustrating as it from a fan base because you're right there and you can't pull away from your competition, or you can say it's exciting as hell because here we are in the middle of December and we're talking about a playoff opportunity for any of like 7 different franchises.
If you're struggling with opioids, you are not
I've done this before. I did it with Kevin Bowen and Mark Dykton on a regular. But, they tell us in radio that the audience rehashes every 22 minutes. So I'm going to take the risk that I'm going to speak to this to an audience that's never heard it before. The opening line of that song, Brendan, he says what?
Shot through the heart, and you're
Say it one more time.
Shot through the heart.
Eddie Garrison, he says what?
Shot through the heart, and you're to blame.
Okay, I thought forever. And I cannot be the only one. Hit it one more time, Eddie. Just the opening line there. Hit it one more time.
3, 2, 1. There you go.
Forever, when that song came out in 1986 or I think 86, I thought it was Shock to the Heart. Shock to the Heart, and you're to blame. I literally, it wasn't until like the iPhone when it sends the lyrics that you can read the lyrics, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Shot Through the Heart. Now, the other one that I constantly get wrong, pull up Edge of 17 by Stevie Nicks, Eddie Garrison.
Okay.
You guys would know the song by title, but you'll know the song as soon as you hear it. I want to know from Brendan King, since you guys just went 2-0 against me on this one. On this next one, I want to know.
I'm not a Stevie Nicks guy, so.
But I know,
lose.
but you'll know the song.
Okay.
I want to know what you think she is saying, okay?
Is this right at the start, or is there a spot where I need to queue up?
Right at the start, okay?
I had to go through, so
well, it has
give me a
music
minute.
that plays first, but then she starts singing, okay? So here we go.
I'm currently waiting for the ad to finish. So.
Oh, okay.
Oh, speaking of ads, you were going to say something.
Speaking
about
of ads, by the way, there's one of them on Twitter right now, X, whatever you want to call it, and I get it. Ads pay the bills. I get it. I don't blame them for incorporating advertising into the social media app. It's how they make money, and it's a free app, right? But there's an ad right now that I think is like a spam ad, and I don't mean for the delicious impostrating in fake meat. I mean actual, and there's a spam ad that keeps showing up on my timeline, and it's for a NASA-produced engineering disc that you put in your car that prohibits snow from accumulating on your windshield, which apparently is totally fake. But literally, it's now up to the point where it's like every fifth thing on my timeline when I scroll, and it's from a gabillion different accounts.
Trying to make it how much is a gabillion, by the way? You said that a lot this week.
It's just slightly more than a billion.
Okay, got it.
It's between
Wouldn't it
billion
be more
and trillion.
Okay, between those two. Got it.
Shohei Ohtani, by the way, deferring close to a gabillion.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
by the way, that is.
Not
So here we go.
2062.
Stevie Nicks. Go ahead and play it, Eddie.
Just like the wide-winged dove sing.
Okay, what does she say there? What kind of dove is it? Play it one more time. She repeats it so you can play it again. Okay.
Just like the wide-winged dove
Yeah.
sing.
I always said when I was a kid, just like the wild things are when I was a
Okay,
kid. Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, Eddie,
Just like a white-winged dove.
you looked at it.
No.
Forever, I thought it was a one-winged dove. A dove with one wing. That makes no sense, granted, but play it one more time. And listen to now. I'll sing along with Stevie here. You ready? Here we go. Okay.
Just like the one-winged dove sings.
Okay. Wait to let it breathe, Eddie. Thanks.
So we had karaoke on Greenie before we went on the air, and now we get Jake Query.
I'm just
karaoke. How
telling you,
about
those things always befuddle me. Always befuddle me. Stephen Holder going to join us just a couple minutes. Last night, your thoughts on the Pacers game. Benedict Mather, and obviously the story, right?
Took care of business when you needed to. I mean, in what was, you talked about it yesterday with Dustin. Obvious trap game. You're able to get a win. But still, I agree with what Dustin said. And the NBA's got to take a look next year at scheduling after the in-season tournament. Now, I'm sure the NBA didn't expect to see the Pacers there in the championship or in Vegas for that matter. And there are teams you probably don't have to worry about with that. But just when you make the schedule next year, maybe don't send a team that even has a shot or a lick at the in-season tournament Vegas section. Don't send them on a long road trip right after.
You know, it was the perfect proverbial trap game, though.
It was.
Because, and I think that actually shows, I'm not going to say a maturity by the Pacers, because it's not like there is an example you can use in the past where you'd say, last year's team would have gone in and completely rolled over in that game or that kind of thing. But it is that is what a mature team does, is goes into that game and just is aware of the potential letdown from it. And I don't really understand. I mean, Detroit obviously is historically bad, but I don't really understand why, because they do have players.
And a good coach.
Yeah, correct. I mean, you know what I mean? They have all of that, right? And I mean, it is, maybe it's rebuild time. Maybe it's learning process time. I don't know. But nonetheless, it was the perfect situation. Now, for the Pacers, the challenge is going to be to kind of maintain that focus or stay on that accelerator, because you're away from home for a while now. And, you've got the schedule is such that, and they knew it, but Eddie, you were saying, I mean, you obviously are the producer for the radio broadcast. I mean, it's a while before they're back here, right?
Yeah, they're not back here for, I think, 2 weeks. And Kevin Bowen put it nicely worded it perfectly last night on Twitter, or as I like to call it, Twix. He just called it a professional win for the Pacers. And after the game, Rick Carlisle spoke to the media, and that was probably the very first thing he said.
This is one of the most difficult games you can have, coming off of the emotions of last week, the game Saturday, the travel. I just thought our guys did a great job of staying together, keeping their composure and their aggression.
So now they go at Milwaukee, at Washington, and at Minnesota. Now, Milwaukee is going to be tough. One of the things that Carlisle mentioned this morning, and I think it's a really good point, about the play-in tournament, the in-season tournament. The one drawback for it is this. By all of those games but the Laker game are reflected in your schedule, in your record. When it comes time to playoff seeding and et cetera, it's reflected. For Indiana, the challenge is you got to the point where you win your first, whatever it was, 3 games, and then all of a sudden now you're having to go up against like Milwaukee in the quarterfinal and the semi, Milwaukee, Boston, actually inversed order there, but you are strengthening the opponents that you're playing against, and it's going into your regular season. Whereas if you had not, I guess the trade-off is that's because you got wins, so it kind of balances out maybe. In other words, you could say, well, if they'd have lost that game to Cleveland or Atlanta, they would have had an easier 2 games there towards the end of that tournament, but that would have come because they lost games. So I guess it balances out in the wash, so to speak. But it is tough to go against Milwaukee again after you just obviously played them, then again at Washington, at Minnesota. Those 2 games, pretty doable. Then home against the Clippers and the Hornets before you go back on the road again and go to Memphis. So busy stretch for them over the next 8 days, but they are not home again until Monday, right, Eddie?
Yeah,
Monday against the Clippers?
Yeah, when I said 2 weeks, it was from the start of this road trip.
Well, that's,
or from the last time they played the Celtics.
They knew when they played Boston, Carlisle talked about that this morning, they left knowing that they were going to have to either go to New York or then go out, they left not knowing who they were going to play, but knowing that they weren't going to be playing again at home, to your point, for several days. Stephen Holder is at home. Going to talk Colts with us. He's going to do it next.
The Wake Up Call with
I want to ask Stephen Holder how he hears this. Can he hear it, you think? Stephen, when Stevie Nicks is singing that right there, Stevie Nicks, Stephen Holder, make acquaintance with one another. What do you think she's saying? What kind of dove is she singing about there?
I have no idea. I've heard that song before. I am not really super familiar with the lyrics. So I don't know. I'd need to listen more carefully maybe, but do you know?
Now, could you hear it right there when we played it?
I heard it, but I was distracted.
Okay. Now I need you to be not distracted, Stephen. We're doing very professional radio here, okay?
That's true. That's
okay.
true. I am
play
part of the
Play
company.
it one more time, Eddie. That's right. You are part of the company. You're the director of professionalism. Eddie, one more time, play it. And Stephen, listen closely. Here we go.
Just like the wide-winged dove sings a song.
Okay, what kind of dove?
I don't know. I think I'm an idiot. I don't know. What am I missing?
Well, she says white-winged dove, and apparently I'm an idiot because I never knew it was white-winged dove. I'm fairly certain she's saying one-winged dove. And here I was for like 40 years thinking that she was philanthropic singing about a disadvantaged dove, right?
So, wait. So what are the lyrics? What are the actual lyrics?
Just like the white-winged dove.
Oh, and you thought it was one wing.
Yes.
Okay.
I thought the whole time like it was super
That's so
impressive this
sad.
dove was flying around with one wing.
That would be so sad.
No, right?
That would be terrible.
Right. Well, a one-winged dove,
Yeah.
like, peace is in jeopardy because the dove only has one wing. It could go down at any moment. You know what I mean?
This reminds me of the time my sister, when we were kids, I think found like an injured dove in the backyard and like tried to hang on to it and in this makeshift cage. I think it was like a milk crate or something she put over it, and it was like this was the most haphazard thing. It was kind of like this was definitely a hood pet.
Did the dove make it?
It died. It died. It was but probably because it wasn't eating. I don't know that she fed it. I was like, this is a very ill-conceived.
What did you grow up with,
effort
Prince?
by you.
Here's the thing. You grew up in Miami, though. That wasn't a dove. That was a seagull, just so you know.
Or like one of those white pigeons or something.
Right,
I don't know.
right.
Probably.
Hey, okay, terrible segue here, but nonetheless, which Colts right now, speaking of injuries, right? I thought Juju Brents might have been ready to go. Obviously, needs more time. Wasn't there for Cincinnati. The Colts are a little banged up in that defensive backfield. Where do things stand first and foremost? And I know that, like, this week they haven't done anything yet, so it's kind of hard to say. But, where are we in particular with Brents?
That is a huge mystery. And the update as of today, just leaving the facility now, the update as of today is there may be an opportunity this week for him, but to the best. I don't know what to make of it. I mean, Juju Brents is walking around the locker room every day on two legs. That doesn't mean anything, but I'm just saying he looks like a guy who's pretty mobile. He's been saying for weeks that he's close, but he has been intentionally vague about the details of his injury, and I think he's taking his cues from his head coach. They all do now. They're walking and talking Steichenism now, or Steichen's language, I guess. So anyway, it's become pretty difficult to get details when you have one of these ongoing situations like that. So I don't know. I wish I could be more specific, but I can't right now. But I will say you are correct. They really do miss him. The depth in the defensive backfield has been an issue all year. And I think you really miss it against a team like Cincinnati. And so people ask, why did they give up those big screens, those big screenplays? Part of the reason and part of the answer is because they played very soft against those receivers and played very deep. So it gave away a lot of underneath stuff because they were, frankly, very afraid to give up big plays in the passing game against Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, for example. So they did a good job. It was effective. That strategy was effective to some degree, but it also wound up meaning that they gave up those big screenplays, 3 of them alone for 124 yards.
Hey, Steven, looking at the run game, and, Zach Moss has not been able to replicate yet what he did at the start of the season, and maybe that was why the Colts run game was so satisfying, because Moss was doing what you would think Jonathan Taylor would have done to begin the season. So that's not happening right now. And when Taylor had the surgery, I think the first number that came back was 2 to 3 weeks, right? And Shane Steichen saying today when he was asked, is the plan for him to come back and play this season? He's saying that's the plan. Is there an urgency that you can sense to get Taylor back out there quicker than anticipated, because Moss has not been able to replicate what he did to begin the campaign?
Well, I mean, if he was able to play, they'd put him out there. But I think there is legitimate concern about his ball handling, if he's not quite ready. And that's the thing. I mean, if you're talking about an injury to a different extremity, there might be a different calculation. But here you're talking about the ball security, and there's nothing more important than the ball. I just think that's going to have to be an ongoing evaluation, and they can't really take chances on that. If they're not sure, I just think he has to sit. I mean, it's not worth the trade-off if you're not sure that he can hang on to the football. It's not worth the trade-off of putting him out there when you're less than certain that he'll have good ball security. It's just, you just can't do it. So I think they're in a different circumstance with a different injury. They might handle it differently. They might push him along and make him or allow him maybe to get back out there before he's 100%. But, I mean, here I just think you really have to be careful and tread lightly, and I think they will.
Stephen Holder's our guest, by the way, from ESPN. He joins us here on the program talking about the Colts. When you look at this matchup, and I know that we're probably getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but what we know about Pittsburgh is this. Historically speaking, the Colts have struggled with that franchise. Historically speaking means nothing because, I don't see necessarily like Neil O'Donnell going out there, right?
Right.
That said, what we know now is that Mitchell Trubisky will be under center and that Kenny Pickens, his little hands, won't be out there. How much does that change Pittsburgh? We look at it and we go, well, man, they're down their starter, but Trubisky's an experienced guy, and is there a huge drop-off from one to the other?
No, for me, the big concern is still the defense. I don't think it changes how I see that team. They're a team that is going to thrive if their defense thrives. They have not been putting up huge offensive numbers at all this year. I mean, even with their starting quarterback. So I'm not saying there's no difference, but I don't think it's going to be the difference in this game. I just don't believe that to be the case. This is an aggressive defense, a physical defense. We'll see what happens with T.J. Watt and his. I believe he's still in concussion protocol, which would be a huge break for the Colts if he doesn't play. Let's just be honest. I mean, given what we saw against Trey Hendrickson against Cincinnati the other day, and the struggles the Colts had blocking him, I mean, I shudder to think what it might look like against T.J. Watt, who is as good as it gets. I think he is on par, obviously, with Myles Garrett, and you saw what Myles Garrett did. So you're talking about the elite of the elite, and the Colts have had some struggles against guys like that this year. So that's really what it's going to boil down to: how they handle that defense, and whether they can allow Minshew to stay clean, and whether they can generate some running game to get some balance back. I mean, this is the other thing I'll mention here, and then I'll move on. I wrote a story today about the struggles of the running game. And right now, again, this is an oversimplification, and I tweeted this, so I admit to that. However, just look at the raw numbers. With Jonathan Taylor in the lineup this season, the Colts, 4.4 yards per carry. That's pretty good. That is top 10 in the league in those particular games, in that span of games. 7 games, I think. In games without Jonathan Taylor, talking about while he was on the PUP list and during this current stretch where he has been, or he underwent thumb surgery, 3.6 yards per carry. So 4.4 versus 3.6. Maybe it doesn't sound like a lot, but you multiply that over dozens and hundreds of carries, and that's a ton of yards over the course of the season.
Stephen Holder is our guest. Stephen, I want to go back to Brennan's question about the running game and Zach Moss. Obviously Taylor out. I'll begin with the Taylor side of things. We haven't really discussed this with you much. Do you believe the Colts were 100% absolutely, understandably on board with the surgery that has shelved Jonathan Taylor, or would they have liked to have seen him get a little duct tape and play through it?
No, the sense that I got was that it would have been difficult. The stability of the ball as he's carrying it would have made rehabbing it versus having surgery difficult.
Okay.
So you had to fix it, is what I understand. Yeah.
In terms of their inability to effectively run the ball against Cincinnati, I mean, how much of that's on the Bengals, and how much of that is was that like an anomaly, or, as I always say, at the end of year, sometimes things that percolated over the course of the year all start to show themselves in mass? Was there smoke and mirrors about the Colts running game earlier in the year, or was this a one-game anomaly?
Well, I would say it's actually not a one-game anomaly, because you saw it the previous week against Tennessee as well. That's the problem. I think if this were the first time we had seen that kind of rushing performance, that would be one thing. But I don't think it was. I mean, again, Tennessee, I think they were under 3 yards per carry against Tennessee, also without Taylor. And then this week, under 3 yards per carry again. That's not sustainable. I mean, you have to have a pretty prolific passing game, as they did in Tennessee, to win when that's the kind of rushing production you're getting. You can do it, and teams do it. I mean, the Buffalo Bills have had situations like that, over the last few years, where they didn't really try to run the football very much. They didn't generate much, but they had a prolific passing game, and their quarterback, Austin, ran for a lot of yards. So in a very specific situation, you can overcome that, but it has to be a very narrow situation, and that is not the Colts right now. They don't have a prolific passing game. Do I think they were smoke and mirrors early? What I'd say is I think teams have a better read on how to defend them now with Gardner Minshew, as opposed to when he was just becoming the starter and also in and out of the lineup, as Anthony Richardson kind of had those brushes with injuries early on before the season-ending injury. So the situation now is different. I mean, they have, I don't know how many games has Gardner Minshew started, right? I mean, 8 or 9, so they have a lot of film. They have their tendencies. They have their likes and dislikes, all of that. Makes it tougher, no doubt about it.
Stephen Holder is our guest from ESPN. Stephen, obviously much better at deciphering and breaking down NFL games and film than he is rehabilitating peaceful birds that simply were trying to go through the backyard and get a little something to eat in Miami some years ago.
It's my sister, man. It was all her fault. She should have let this. I mean,
no, hold on.
I had just left it to die.
Older or okay, here we go. I mean, great signs of peace. Older or younger sister?
Younger sister. Younger.
Well,
She's
then,
the baby.
Stephen, you were in charge. How can we trust you?
Well, yeah, I wasn't exactly living up to my expectations, I suppose. Yeah. So, all right, I'll take that.
How can he be our director of professionalism now?
No, you have been absolutely demoted, Stephen. You are on probation, and if we had an HR department, you report to him tomorrow. But we don't, so you're probably safe, right?
Good thing we're short-staffed.
Hey, what's the area of the Colts? We focus so much on this show, Stephen, we focus so much on like ball security. Obviously, the defensive backfield, as we talked about with Juju Brents being out. And then all of a sudden, usually towards the end of the year, something happens to a team and you look at it and go, the warning was there all along, and that's the one warning light we just didn't pay attention to. What area is that of the Colts that is a bigger concern than we publicly talk about?
I mean, I think we probably have talked a lot about Gardner Minshew, but I mean, they've been they have been kind of piecing their passing game together. You know what I mean? And so this isn't necessarily meeting the qualification of your question, because you said the area we don't talk about enough, and we do. But I just think I would say this. Nationally, it's been kind of interesting. Nationally, when I do interviews, be it on ESPN radio or whatever, right, I get a lot of questions about, well, I mean, how about that Gardner Minshew? Man, what a year that guy's having. And it puts me in this situation where I have to kind of like set the record straight, but I have to do it without like slapping the guy over the head and insulting him, because I don't think his play has been awful. I don't. But I also don't think it has been spectacular, you know? So it's just it's an interesting narrative that's out there. And a lot of times, you know, the broadcasters come into town, they see a couple of games of the Colts, and so, you know, they're making their judgments based on a very small sample size. It's not anybody's fault. I'm not blaming anyone. I mean, we all do it, you know, for teams that we're not as familiar with. But it's just kind of interesting how that's kind of taken shape this year, and that narrative's taken shape. It's like, yeah, we should probably be giving more credit to Shane Steichen, to be completely honest. So not a great answer to your question, but it is. I have kind of enjoyed watching that play out. Or let me put it this way: it's been interesting to watch that narrative take shape, and then, you know, when he doesn't perform well, then it's kind of like, well, you know, kind of told you that. But no, everybody involved has done a good job. Where Minshew has, I think, acquitted himself well, not this week, but in previous weeks, is that, and Rick Venturi actually kind of crystallized this for me in a recent conversation. He said his ability to shake off bad plays is elite, and it really is. And he needs that, right? Because he does make some mistakes sometimes. And these head-scratching decisions, and you're like,
Did we lose Steven?
55 yards.
There we go.
Oh, there we are.
Steven, we lost you there for a second, so pick up where you were talking about how he does make some head-scratching plays.
Yeah, well, he'll make the head-scratching play, but one of his greatest abilities is, as I said, Rick Venturi and I talked about this the other day. He helped crystallize it for me. He said, you know, he'll make a bad play, and then what does he do? Like in Tennessee, he makes a bad decision. They almost get intercepted on that game-winning drive, and then what's he do? He turns around and he rips one for 55 yards to Alec Pierce like nothing ever happened. That's a great quality. It's a great quality because, I mean, look, he's an imperfect quarterback, and that's okay. We know that. But he does have the ability to bounce back from that and to make plays that are really impressive in the face of a bad play.
You're not getting pulled over, are you, Steven? I hear the
someone's
gendarmes in the
having a
background.
bad day though because someone's going to the hospital. So.
Okay, well, we hope everybody's okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Steven, who's made more money for themselves in the last 5 weeks, Michael Pittman or Grover Stewart?
Well, Michael Pittman, because his contract's going to be bigger. But I do agree with the premise, though, when you mention Grover Stewart. I mean, now, it wasn't maybe quite as evident this week because they didn't have a great day defensively. But I would argue that Grover Stewart's presence in the middle actually, you know, probably influenced the Bengals to not try to run near as much. And that's where those screenplays maybe come in. You know, that was an intentional game plan by them. Their game plan was certainly not to run up the middle. That is certainly not the case. I mean, they had some runs to the outside, but they were not trying to run up the middle of the field, given the presence, I presume, the presence of Grover Stewart. But Michael Pittman, though, I would say give him credit. I mean, he's the one guy who unequivocally showed up on Sunday. You know, his consistency is absolutely impressive. It's one of the best things about him is that he consistently shows up. And I love that he makes those plays even though the defense knows he's getting the ball. You know, and I think in talking to like Isaiah McKenzie today, we were talking about this whole argument about, well, is he a number one receiver or is he not? And as Isaiah said, he said, look, I don't care, man. He says he's our number one receiver. He says they know where the ball's going, and he makes those plays in spite of it. I mean, it's a big compliment to be able to say, look, we're going to throw you the ball no matter the defense, no matter the coverage, no matter how much attention you're drawing. I mean, that says something about a guy, and that's the way the Colts have conducted themselves throwing to Gardner Minshew this season. Throwing to Michael Pittman this season from Gardner Minshew.
Steven, I've also got a this or that for you. Ronnie Harrison, product of the system, or is there some untapped potential there?
There could be some untapped potential. I don't think we have enough sample size to know, but I would say that his defensive back skills certainly have come in handy a couple of times. I don't think that's a coincidence, that he has made those plays on the ball. What other linebacker has 2 interceptions this year? I'm not sure any of them do. He has a nose for the ball, and one of the first interception he made, which I think was against I can't remember, but Tampa Bay maybe. That was, I'm not saying it was the toughest play in the world, but if you look at the one on Sunday, that's just an instinctive play. I mean, he's playing the ball as much as the man, and that's what you're taught as a defensive back, right? You're taught to play the football, and that's just more instinctive for you. So I think that showed up in the play that he made on Sunday. And look, I mean, we'll see. I mean, again, we need more of a sample size and just his overall linebacker playing ability. But, for a guy this deep into his career, I think this is his 5th season or something like that. Now, for a guy this deep into his career to make a position change and to be able to be a viable starter in a pinch like that, I mean, that says a lot about your ability just as a football player, period.
Steven, probably at this point fading in relevance, but still topical. What did you think of, if at all, Shaquille Leonard's performances, assuming that you saw some of what he was able to do against Dallas?
I did see it. I thought, look, I mean, he moved pretty well. I mean, as well as I've seen him move this year, whether that's good enough to be the old Shaquille Leonard, that's a different question. But look, he's probably still a little timid just because he's trying to kind of, learn the scheme and understand where he's supposed to be all the time and all that. So, probably not the best game to judge him by. But look, he's going to have to adapt to a very small role. That's pretty clear. I mean, he's not going to play a ton. And even when he gets the scheme down and he has a better understanding, I still don't think he's going to be a guy who plays wire to wire for Philadelphia, short of additional injuries. So, but good for him. I'm happy for him. I hope the Eagles go a long way and he gets a chance to enjoy the ride because he's a good guy, good player, and I still wish him the best.
Lastly, we had a guy on before the Colts-Bucks game from Tampa, an area where you used to work, obviously. You're a native of Florida. I have probably asked you this privately before. I'll ask you publicly now. You would have known no different. I realize that when you were a kid growing up. But all of the imagery, all of the songs, all of the legend of Christmas is about snow and bells and sleigh riding and big coats on Santa and all of it, and you know what I mean, and chimneys and all of it, right?
Yeah.
Was it odd? I mean, I guess you knew no different, but was it weird living in, for you, a warm weather shorts and T-shirt climate at Christmas time?
Well, your instinct is right. I mean, I didn't know any better, so it's what we knew. But it was very conflicting, like watching the Christmas specials, be it, whatever, your favorite Christmas movie is.
Frosty or The Abominable Snowman or any of it, right?
And having no understanding whatsoever of what any of that stuff was like. So it's completely unrelatable to you. It's completely unrelatable. I always tell this all the time. I think I probably said this to you. I mean, growing up, what you wanted for Christmas was a bike. Why? Because everybody got a bike for Christmas, and on that afternoon, everybody meet on the corner, and they all ride your bikes on Christmas afternoon. We ain't riding bikes on Christmas afternoon in Indianapolis for the most part, at least not for fun.
Right.
So yeah, it's culturally just a completely different thing and very strange. There was, though, in the year of my birth, 1976, we had a trace of snow in South Florida, not on Christmas, but there was a trace of snow. The only time on record that I'm aware of, 1976, you can look that up. In Miami, there were flurries, And
known affectionately there as the Blizzard of '76, right?
Yes. I mean, it was awful. It was awful. So,
there was I don't know if you know this or not, but Scarface had a blizzard of 81 in Miami in the area as well, right? Just so we know.
Yes, and that one definitely was a blizzard.
Now, Stephen, here's the thing: you had to have been also miffed by the fact that a guy was able to pull around a sleigh with flying reindeer, and you couldn't save a bird.
That's fair. But also, along the same lines, though, of just being unrelatable. Like, how was the sleigh coming to my house when it's 70 degrees on Christmas, right? Like, how did that not click for me when I was a kid? I must have been an idiot.
That's a good point. Well, Santa, he's got on a Speedo under the coat, just so you know, Stephen,
right.
just for when he has to go south. Okay. Well, he goes around.
Sense.
He goes the whole world, so he goes to warm places as well, so he packs accordingly, Stephen.
The
Stephen
whole
Holder,
idea
ESPN.
is dumb. They really think little of kids. Like, they just don't. They don't.
Come
think
on,
that we're very smart.
kids listening. It's the
Hey,
magic
now,
of Christmas.
I was about to say, don't spoil it now for any kids that are out there listening, Jake
It's
and
the
Steven.
magic of Christmas. That's the magic, the beauty of Santa Claus, and why he's able to go around the world in
He's
one
amazing.
evening. He is that.
He's amazing.
He is exactly that. Stephen Holder, ESPN. Appreciate the conversation. We'll talk to you next week. All right.
All right. See you guys.
Thanks, Steven.
I appreciate this. Somebody just sent me a text. Jake, I'm 59 years old. That's the first time I have ever heard of the fact that it is not the one-winged dove. I'm telling you, right?
I have an all-time Christmas bird story for you.
Does it involve a dinner by chance?
No,
Ooh.
but I'll tell you after the timeout.
Oh,
All right. We'll do it on the other side. Alex Golden, 2 o'clock.
You've heard about the thousands of patients finally getting.
To stay in theme, I'm going to make an official show declaration here. You ready?
Okay. We each play a song or request a song that we Didn't know the lyrics to.
Well, that's also good. I was going to say songs related to birds for the rest of the show.
I thought you were going to play Surfing Bird coming out of this.
Whether we're going to play the birds, whether you want to play When Doves Cry, which would have been totally appropriate since Steven's sister's dove probably struggled. You can play the Eagles, even though I think they're incredibly sleepy, whatever it might be, for the rest of the program. Although mistaken lyrics also a good topic for sure.
Although when we had Brendan King in a couple of weeks ago for Jimmy while he was out, we didn't hire him as a part of the company. Can we hire him yet?
Yeah, is anything open?
We're not taking interns.
You said
yet.
that 2 weeks ago.
Well, see, the director of professionalism is open since Stephen Holder got relegated back to.
Can I apply for something and then you can look after the holidays?
I got news for you guys, and it's disappointing, I realize. Eddie, could you check real quick on your phone and see what the temperature forecast is for the next few days?
Okay.
Like tomorrow morning. So if we were to meet about this and talk about this in the morning, tomorrow, Thursday, or Friday, rest of the week, tell me the temperatures when you get up in the morning. Like if we come in here about 7.
27 degrees in the morning.
Yep.
For tomorrow.
Uh-huh. Next.
I'm trying to look at Thursday.
26.
Yep.
Friday.
About the same.
29.
Yeah.
Well, I got news for you. Those are all under 32, which is applicable because we're on a hiring freeze, right? So Brendan, we'll do what we can here, but Jimmy's on vacation. We can't just surrender his seat just yet, right?
I'll tell you what. I'll leave you my resume.
He was
you can let me know after the holidays.
He was quick to get rid of my position when I was gone for a week. And Nathaniel Finch was in here filling in, and he immediately got hired. So I don't know what it is.
It's because Nathaniel shares the same name as Atticus Finch, and you want scruples within your company, right?
Hopefully Jimmy doesn't get brought in for any UK jury duty, huh?
I just hope he can get his luggage.
I wonder how their jury system works, right?
They're going to find out who Jack the Ripper was. He's going on trial.
That's exactly right.
Just hope he can get his luggage.
They
lost his luggage.
Did they really?
Mm-hmm.
That is
how much Chiefs stuff was
that's
in
a rookie
there?
mistake.
I don't know.
Hopefully he didn't bring his Chiefs
the wedding band. Oh yeah.
What's he going to wear on Sundays?
It's probably in his luggage.
Yeah.
Unless he flew out on Sunday, in which point he was wearing his Chiefs band and his wedding band is in his lost luggage.
Good call, Jake. Very good call.
How about that?
Wow.
That would be an issue. Okay, Brendan, you had a bird story, is that right?
I do have a Christmas bird story for you. So when I was a kid, I wasn't allowed, or my sister and I, we weren't allowed to have a dog yet because my dad's opinion on dogs definitely shifted. So he hated dogs and he liked dogs. There was a key transition. Anyway, we did not have a pet in the King household. So my mom didn't like cats. No offense, Jake.
Understood.
So the general consensus was we could get a pet, but it could not be a dog or a cat. And we didn't want to go fish route, so we thought maybe about a bird. So we went to the mall, my sister and I, and we asked Santa, who was filling in for the real guy, of course, as always. That's how mall Santas work. We asked, can we do a bird? Can we have a bird? He said, you know what? I'll work on it. So my parents then spoke with Santa.
Mm-hmm.
They called up to the North Pole and they said, here's what we'll do. Santa told us that we can go get the bird and he'll bring you the cage and the food and everything, right? So I didn't know the second half of this story until later. So we woke up on Christmas morning. There it was, the cage, the food, everything that you need for a parakeet. But there was no bird. So I asked my parents, and they said, oh, Santa actually said he's going to bring it. Just give it a few days. What ended up happening was my parents went to the pet store.
Santa went to the pet store.
Well, no, because remember they talked with Santa, and they said
gotcha.
Santa said you could go get the bird.
Okay, gotcha.
Right? So my parents went to the pet store, purchased the parakeet. Christmas morning, they went back downstairs, opened the box. Parakeet's no longer with us.
Really?
Yeah.
You mean no longer with us like the parakeet was a perished keet, or like
the parakeet was like the bird in Dumb and Dumber.
Okay.
Where he was no longer with us.
So the parakeet didn't fly the coop. The parakeet. No, wait a minute. Your parents wrapped the parakeet in a box and then wondered why?
No. So they put the parakeet in like a box with air holes.
Right. Okay.
Right. But the next morning he was perished.
So did you get a replacement parakeet?
We did.
Okay, good. And
we did, and we named him Frosty.
And now, just out of curiosity, the initial parakeet, So you were not aware.
I was not aware of this until much later.
Okay. So Frosty the parakeet lasted how long?
Oh, he was a good bird. He stayed many, many years.
What is the life expectancy of a parakeet?
You know what? I forgot how old he was when he passed.
Did he? Let me ask you this:
This is great radio, isn't it?
Did you ever, when you had the parakeet, was it annoying? Like we had a bird
No.
when I was in college. We had several pets of the guys that I lived with, and one of them was a bird, and I felt terrible for it. It never shut up.
Yeah. Frosty was a very good bird. He did not chirp at night.
Yeah. Did you put the thing over his cage?
No, didn't have to. He was a great bird.
So during the day, though, how loud was he?
Oh, just chirpy.
And then
nothing over the top.
And how long what's the life expectancy there?
8 to 9 years. He probably lived about 7 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. And then do you take birds to the vet?
Never had to bring him to the vet.
He just sits in. Did you ever let him out?
Oh yeah. In the garage. So like when you had to, my sister and I, our responsibility since he was our pet, we had to clean his cage, right? So we took the cage into the garage, and he could. We had a small garage, so he was able to fly around, and he knew that he was smart enough where his cage is clean. We put some food there, and then he goes back in.
So he knew the food was there.
He knew the food. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Anyway, so that's my. So I did not know until later that the first bird had flown down the south for the winter.
Okay.
And a replacement.
You know what that
parakeet.
means? You know what that means? The sad part of this story, Brendan. That means that poor the first one.
Yeah.
That means that poor bird had been waiting 7 years in that store to have somebody take him home, right? And then your parents came along. They made Christmas the dream a reality.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, see, that's tragic, right?
Just like the cute fella making the playoffs and a first-round exit.
You know what? We have here at Urban One Radio, we are based out of Baltimore, and we are currently in the process at this radio station of moving around some things, including I think we've mentioned we are now in a different studio from the 6th floor studios. We're down on the 4th floor, same building, right on Monument Circle. But some of our fun coworkers are here from Baltimore, from the parent company, to help in facilitating some of those changes, making the engineering changes, etc. And yesterday, saw several of them wearing the Orioles hat. And we had, first off, I told them they had the hat that just had the O's. And I'm like, no. You got to go with the cute fella hat. But then we talked about the fact that October, much different than the rest of the year.
Your new closer, Craig Kimbrell.
I'm telling you what, man. You had a feeling with the Orioles that that's how it was going to go, right? Whenever a team has that kind of a season, just a magic summer, and then it goes into it, and you just never know, man. That's the thing about baseball. You just absolutely never know. One other thing, by the way, I want to point out, because I saw a lot of people mentioning this yesterday when it comes to the new contract of Shohei Ohtani. Look.
It's ridiculous.
What's ridiculous about it?
The fact that he would do something like that in the market in which he's doing it in. Like, if you're going to do something like that, in my opinion,
now what
go
we're
to
talking
a smaller
about is
market
this.
team, because
what we're talking about is the fact that he signed a 10-year, $700 million contract, which is slated to pay him $70 million a year. But what he is doing is deferring $68 million per year to backload the contract, so that in the initial years, the salary cap, it only hits a $2 million hit against the Dodgers. Now, your complaint, Eddie, is?
My complaint is that if you're going to do something like that, it completely helps a team like a small market team who may not have the funds and the resources to pay, the 10 years, $700 million throughout the course of the 10 years, to do it the way he did in terms of deferring it. So it's a 10-year, $2 million contract for the length that he signed for, and then he's getting $68 million a year for the next 10 years. So from 2034 to 2044, I would rather have seen him go to a small market team to do that, because now this is just going to create a huge problem, in my opinion.
Here's the question.
With superstars in the MLB.
Does that $68 million then go against the well, of course, there's no cap in baseball, right?
Nope.
But it goes against the Dodgers' payroll. And so, in other words, so the first year that he is going to start making $68 million is when?
2034.
So in 2034, the Dodgers are going to have to account for $68 million for a guy that's not playing.
I'm sure Shohei Ohtani will be able to bring in $68 million or very close to that a year now with him being in L.A.
Okay.
The amount of marketing that they should be able to do with him should be endless.
Well,
and the exposure that he's going to get now, he'll see more ESPN games. He'll be in the playoffs.
You're familiar with where the Angels play, right?
I am familiar, yes.
They play in Los Angeles.
Yep.
My point is this. if in fact he is able to bring in that kind of money, then it's a free market enterprise. Then good for him, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why he's able to do it. That's why they're able to do it. I mean, I get it. If the conversation is about that, then it simply is a matter of whether or not baseball should have a cap and get a fair, part of the NFL we talked about earlier in the parity of the NFL. A big part of that is because, and this was always my counter, not to get into this necessarily because it becomes a pretty deep in the weeds conversation, but my counter about the Colts, when the Colts were playing in the RCA Dome, and they came out and they were talking about how they wanted a new stadium, which, as we know, is Lucas Oil Stadium. And I remember Bill Polian saying, "You don't understand. We are handcuffed as a franchise. There's a limit to what we can do because we don't have the facility that other teams do in terms of our revenue." I've never bought into that. I think it was a total hoodwink and and don't get me wrong, it worked out for them and for the Colts because they've made, the Colts value now, the valuation of the Colts is probably, and a lot of this is because of Peyton Manning. I totally get that. But the value of the franchise, partially because of the public subsidy that comes with Lucas Oil Stadium, has turned it into a multi-billion-dollar corporate enterprise. But it's done that within the structure of a league that has revenue sharing and a salary cap. So theoretically speaking, the profit margin for the Green Bay Packers is the same as the Minnesota Vikings or the Miami Dolphins or the Dallas Cowboys. Maybe baseball should adopt that same mentality if, in fact, they want to give the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Cincinnati Reds, the Baltimore Orioles the same advantages that are shared by the Los Angeles Dodgers, the LA Angels, the New York Yankees. But along those lines, the World Series champions, Dallas is not a small market, don't get me wrong, but the Dodgers haven't won a World Series except for the COVID year, since what, 88? Right?
Yeah.
The Yankees had an era of dominance for certain. But what about the Mets? The Mets and the Yankees both, between the two of them, how many World Series have they won in the last 20 years? I mean, the Yankees have obviously been a great franchise, and they are the creme de la creme for certain.
I mean, 20 years won.
But, yeah, exactly, right? So, does Ohtani, the thing to me that is interesting is, and I get it, the Dodgers are a bigger brand than the Angels. I get it. But first off, they're taking a huge risk. I know he's a great player.
Risky. So
I know he's a great player, but he's coming off Tommy John. He's a great hitter. But people that are like, yeah, but that lineup is just stacked. He just got done playing with Mike Trout. There is no greater combo you can come up with in baseball than Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout as teammates, right?
I think there's one. Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, I'm saying, but in terms of that have been on an existing team.
Yeah.
Here's the one difference. I know we're short on time. The big difference between the Angels and the Dodgers is LA, their farm system is elite. Anaheim has not been able to develop talent for a decade plus, other than Mike Trout, but that wasn't a whole lot of development needed. The Angels farm system is bare. It's terrible. Remember when they acquired all those guys at the trade deadline this year?
And now they're all free agents.
They traded their top two prospects to the White Sox for Giolito, and they let him go before the year ended. The Angels are a disaster. The only difference is that the Dodgers farm system is elite with still guys coming up.
But that's not why he went there.
No, not at all. Not at all. But the lineup, it's going to be good for as long as he's there. Now, I still think, Jake, it's very risky to bring him in and do this. This is a larger scale Bobby Bonilla. That's all it is.
I remember
Bobby Bonilla
when,
is going to turn into Shohei Ohtani.
I remember when, and this is going back, and this shows you how much things have changed. But when Alex Rodriguez was probably the most coveted free agent since Ohtani was Alex Rodriguez when he was after his first deal with Seattle. And when Alex Rodriguez signed his deal with the Texas Rangers, a 10-year, $252 million contract.
Remember it well.
And I was in St. Louis covering the Cardinals, and I remember the second that the news broke, I walked into the Cardinals clubhouse. It was in Jupiter, Florida during Cardinals spring training, and I walked right up to Mark McGwire, and I go, who was the biggest star in baseball at that time. It was a year and a half removed from the home run derby. And I go, hey, did you just see this A-Rod contract? And he goes, yeah. And I said, what do you think about 10 years, $252 million for one guy? And he goes, all I can say about it is I never want to hear him or anybody within that organization complain that they can't put players around him. So different scale, but 25 years later, $70 million is kind of the same thing. There are two ways to look at it, and I get it. The way one to look at it would be to say that Shohei Ohtani, it's ridiculous, the Dodgers have scammed the system, etc. The other is to say Shohei Ohtani is a guy that knows that through endorsement money and everything else that he has, he doesn't need from a standpoint, he's probably keeping the same house, right? Doesn't have to go buy a new house. So he is doing what is best for his franchise to help them win. And if he's playing on your team, you champion him for being a great teammate and competitor. If he's playing on another team, you call it greed and exploiting the system. Now, for people that are saying that the biggest issue about it is the fact that he is now dodging taxes in California's incredibly high state tax, not true, because I saw it yesterday, according to a precedent that I believe was determined by a court, I think in Nevada, like 18 or 20 years ago, an income tax, no matter when you no matter when you get the revenue, it goes back to retroactively the area where the revenue was, the service was rendered.
Mm-hmm.
So he can move in 10 years. He can move to Florida, and he is still going to have to pay a California state income tax, because even though the money is retroactive, it is being paid for being earned during the time that the contract was there. Alex Golden going to talk Pacers with us, and he's going to do so in about 12 minutes.
Hey, it's Kevin Bowen, and I see myself on YouTube.
You know, one thing that I think about with the NBA that I think we often overlook, and I know it's different. I mentioned this once before, but think about this. if you look at, I've mentioned this probably a lot, but it continues, and again, it's on display here. It continues to, as I get older and particularly, kind of marvel me. The Pacers played, and Rick Carlisle discussed this morning, and it got really kind of confusing and convoluted in the way he was explaining it. But they beat Boston at the Fieldhouse a week ago, yesterday, right? And so they beat Boston, and then they have to wait to find out whether or not they are playing in Las Vegas against Milwaukee or New York. Okay? So they win. They immediately take off to go to Vegas. They play Milwaukee. Now, if they had lost to Milwaukee, then their next game would have been against.
You mean if they lost to Boston?
No, when they went to Vegas, what would happen if they? Oh, I'm sorry. So if they would have lost, so Milwaukee didn't play after the semifinal, right?
Correct.
Okay, so it was. So they went to Vegas. He was explaining it that they basically had to go to New York. They scheduled to go to New York in case, because if they had lost to Boston, they would have gone and played in New York, right? Isn't that right?
Yes, they would have played Wednesday in New York. So it would have been a back-to-back for the Knicks.
Correct. And then they resumed their regularly scheduled, but as it happens, they have to go out to Vegas. So they fly to Las Vegas. They go to Vegas. Then they go from there straight to Detroit, right? They play Detroit, and then now they turn around and they go to Milwaukee to play there tomorrow night. And then from there, they go down to D.C. and then back up to Minnesota. Look, these aren't like really long flights, but you're playing at like 8 o'clock at night. You get done at game ends at 10:30. You do media availabilities and whatever else. You get done, and then you're hopping on a plane. The one thing that I do think, and I know they're professional athletes, they're in an elite shape that I'll never be in my lifetime. They have chefs, they have massages, they have big planes with big spread out seats. I mean, they ain't hopping on a Spirit flight and waiting to make sure they don't get a middle row seat, okay, is what I'm getting at. But nonetheless, just the travel and the physical exertion of flying all over the place would be tough. And I know they be a great life. Be a great life. But I can't be the only one that thinks this. Like, when you're watching, when I go to a Pacer game, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching warm-ups and the music's playing, and then there's a timeout and like they're playing Rock and Roll Glitter Part 2 and Boomer and the Power Pack come out and they're jumping on trampolines and dunking the ball and flinging little T-shirts into the crowd. And I always watch the opposing team. And I always watch the guys that are the bench warmers for the opposing team. Or just guys that aren't in the rotation in that point in the game. The Miles Plumleys of the world. The guys that are just standing around, they got the sweatpants, their hands in the pocket, and they're watching, they're standing way back in the back of the huddle. They're kind of looking around and watching everything that's going on. And it dawned on me, I'm like, do these guys ever forget what city they're in? Do they ever, sit there and they're like, oh, that's right. Like, I just saw an ad for the local news station here, and I completely forgot we're in Portland. I know you're playing the Blazers, so that would make it easy, right? But just in terms of the arena, they have to be hearing the same songs, seeing the same skits, seeing the same getting the crowd jazzed up level bits, no matter where they are.
So I can't relate to being an NBA player, that's clear. But I can tell you, my first year of being a pro broadcaster in ball was in Boise, Idaho, short season baseball. We played 76 games in 78 days. And there were times when you're on the road and you're on the 6-7 hour bus rides where like, where are we going? What park are we at?
Totally.
Yeah.
Were you playing in multi-game sets?
Yeah. So at the time it wasn't 6-game series yet. It was 3-game series.
So you were at least there for a couple of days. So imagine like when you went to Boise and you play a game And then as soon as the game's over and you get everything done, you're on the bus and boom, now you're on your way to Pocatello, and then after that you're in Reno.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
there have to be times. George Hill told me once that when he was with the Pacers, that on more than one occasion when they would do road trips, he'd go out to get something to eat or whatever and come back, and he'd go to the front desk and say, like, yeah, my card doesn't work. Like, what room are you, sir? And he's like, I'm route 810. And they're like, what's the last name? Hill? No, sir, you're in 1140. Oh, that's right. 810 was last night in Boston. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that kind of thing has to happen.
Definitely.
But I wonder, like, over the course of a season, how many different songs, different skits, bits did the team see? Or is it literally – Naptown Seth would be a good person to know because he goes to the games on the road with the Pacers. So he'd be able to tell you how much variety there really is. Now, granted, it's all different when you go to Denver because Rocky's the greatest mascot. And no disrespect to Boomer. Not named Boomer. Rocky's the creme de la creme.
What is Rocky? What is their mascot?
He's the Nuggets mascot, and he is a mountain lion. But he's got a lightning bolt for a tail.
That's right. I always get confused because the Suns mascot is a gorilla.
Yeah, that's right.
He does a ton of stunts, and he gets paid a boatload of money.
You talk about the gorilla?
No, Rocky.
Oh, well, Rocky. It's because he's awesome. I don't know if you know that.
Hey, that's a full-time gig.
All those guys. That all started, a lot of the mascot craze started with a bunch of guys that were roommates, I believe gymnasts at Arizona State together, and they went and they each got different jobs. Now, there was a guy in Phoenix, literally, I kid you not, you can Google this, I don't know, 10 years ago, there was a guy in Phoenix that lived in Phoenix and every day drove to work and accumulated like $700. They have automatic speeding, the cameras that catch you.
Yeah.
And so he got caught. He racked up like $700 in speeding tickets. Jeez. And he went to court. He had them for like 6 months worth of speeding tickets. And he went to court for it finally and was like, you know what? I am so glad that you have brought me into court here because I want to get to the bottom of this because somebody every day steals my car and drives my car somewhere and then brings it back and they park it back in my parking spot in my driveway every single day. And all I know is the only idea I've gotten of the guy is that he looks kind of like a gorilla. And they thought he was joking, and so they went and looked at this, the cameras of all of the shots of him speeding along the interstate, and it was a guy in a gorilla mask. And so as a result, they could not actually totally clarify that, in fact, he was the culprit. Now, I'm not saying drive around in a gorilla mask, but I am saying it's pretty darn genius. A golden idea, if you will, and Alex Golden's next.
The Speed.
Now, Stranger Things, is that show still going?
They got one more season left. I think they're filming it now. I think it's supposed to be coming out next year.
What season are they on now?
I want to say 5. It might be 6, but I can't remember.
Have people stayed with it, or has the interest level petered out?
As far as I know, the interest level has stayed with it.
Okay.
But I know that the actors are getting tired of filming it because it's been such a long time.
Now, they don't film it in Indiana, right? Doesn't it take place in Indiana?
Yeah, it takes place in Indiana. Last season, it kind of like they moved from Indiana to California.
Oh, it's like Saved by the Bell.
Yeah, exactly, right? Good Morning, Miss Bliss, and the Saved by the Bell, you got it. So
yeah, hell yeah.
I know my 90s TV a little bit, 80s TV a little bit. But yeah, no, it's then they were in Alaska and Russia and stuff like that. So they had some.
Well, Alaska is right across the street from Russia. You can sit out in Sarah Palin's porch and see Alaska and see Russia from there. It's right there. You know that,
exactly.
Right? Hey, your thoughts last night on the Pacers getting the win over Detroit? We talked about it earlier, Alex. But setting the pace, by the way, is where you can hear Alex Golden. And this was a game that is kind of a no-win situation because they were supposed to win the game, but it was definitely a trap win or a trap game. Your thoughts on it last night?
Yeah, I thought the team really handled the professionalism of playing basketball in like such a crazy schedule. I thought they handled that game pretty well. Having to be in Vegas for the last 5 days, and then flying out, I believe it was Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, and then getting into Detroit, not even going home, and then having to play, at a different time zone that they were used to in Las Vegas. I definitely think that the Pacers, it was a tough spot. And the Pistons, 19 games in a row that they had lost at this point, too. They're trying not to get to 20, so they're definitely playing with more motivation at home. So it was an easy trap game, but I thought the team came in there and they handled business. And it wasn't the greatest, prettiest game, but they found ways to pull one out. And I thought was kind of a tough environment for them.
Are they the deepest, Alex, team in the East? And I don't know. Here's the thing. Sometimes deep teams are deep because their starting five isn't great, and so therefore there isn't a great disparity. I mean, they have a good starting five, obviously, but it does feel like at virtually any position they can go 2, certainly, and maybe even 3, and not every team can do that.
No, I think you're onto something there. I do think that their depth is their strength. So I'm actually with you there. I don't know about the deepest team in the East. I mean, you can make the case for it. I would have to really go into a deep dive of what other teams have in terms of depth. But when you have a guy like Mathurin, McConnell, Aaron Nesmith off the bench, those are all guys that could start. So I mean, I definitely think that you have to kind of sit there and say, okay, they have guys that could start that are off the bench. So their starters, Obi Toppin only played 12 minutes last night. Bruce Brown, he was kind of a six-man last year on the championship team. So how good is their starters? Maybe they're not the greatest starting five, but they have a good group of guys that really click well together, and I think that on any given night could be any one of those guys kind of stepping up and helping Tyrese Halliburton.
Hey, Golden, good to hear your voice. Third straight game for Isaiah Jackson in double figures, also third straight game with at least 5 rebounds. Is he playing well enough right now to potentially take that number 2 5 spot? Because, of course, Jalen Smith is out. Not sure how long he'll be there. But is Isaiah Jackson playing well enough to keep that number 2 position at the 5?
That's a great question. I actually think that Isaiah Jackson has impressed a lot recently with what he's been able to do. I thought in that Lakers game, he probably played better than Miles, and that's no knock on Miles. Miles doesn't have a good game, but I thought Isaiah was actually very impactful in that game.
He was very active.
Yes, and he was blocking shots, 4 block shots, and I feel like he's been a little bit quicker to the basketball this year in terms of protecting the rim, unlike Miles. I feel like Miles has almost been a step slow this year in terms of his rotations over, but regardless, I mean, I still think Jalen Smith is going to be given the opportunity to keep that spot once he comes back from injury. But I do think that it could be a shorter leash with him, and I think that if he's struggling a little bit, then Rick Carlisle will go back to Isaiah because Isaiah has proven the last week at least that he's trustworthy. But if you go back to last Monday against the Celtics, he didn't even get into the game. So I thought that was kind of surprising there. But he earned that trust, I think, with how he played the last 3 games.
This probably files under if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Mm-hmm.
But for the sake of the fun of it, okay? I think that it's easy to get intoxicated, Alex Golden, by what took place with the in-season tournament. That game against the Lakers really did feel like it was like this big, important, holy cow, they got to win this game, and the whole city's watching and bars are packed. And you're like, it's December, and it's a tournament in the season that they just started this year. But clearly the Pacers have a competitive roster. So if they want to tweak that, if once the trade deadline rolls around, if they say to themselves, we learned from the in-season tournament that we need a big-bodied four that can bruise a little bit. We need a wing defender that can also shoot when the ball comes to him in rotation. If those players are available on the market, the players that the Pacers would be willing to part with to make that possible would be who?
Good question. You're going to have to look at guys that probably make bigger salaries. So you're looking at Buddy Hield and Bruce Brown, who are guys that are basically expiring. Same with T.J. McConnell. And then I think if you're looking at maybe some trade chips that would really entice teams, I think Jarris Walker has to be at the forefront of that. And I know that that's probably not what Pacer fans want to hear, but I don't see Indiana moving off of Benedict Mathurin in year two. I think that they believe in what he can become, and they won't trade him. I think Andrew Nembhard is a little bit more a 50-50 for the Pacers, but with Jarris not being able to get into the rotation right now, him being so young and so raw, and this team kind of being a few steps ahead in terms of where they thought they might be with their competitive level and Tyrese Halliburton's ascension, I think that Jarris Walker is someone they could part ways with, as well as some of those other key veterans. But I don't think they'll go after two or three players. I would assume only one, maybe big name if they do make a trade. But they're going to have to make a decision between Bruce Brown and Buddy Hield. And my gut says they would probably trade Buddy over Bruce just because they just signed Bruce in free agency, and they want to make sure they send the right message to free agents that come here, like, hey, we're not just going to sign you then trade you to a team that is kind of in a rebuild. We're gonna value our signing of you and keep you here. So that would be kind of my thought process.
Here's the catch-22 for me with Buddy Hield. I think we've seen, Alex, like especially in the first quarter of this year, that we weren't ready just yet to elevate that Benedict Mathurin like running mate status to go with Tyrese Halliburton. And Hield has such a quick release that he gives them the outside shooting that is so coveted in the league, but he can do so fairly quickly when, especially with their pacing, he works really well with what they do. That's the real benefit of him, and I think this year they have benefited from him more than they perhaps even thought they were going to at that first half of this year, first quarter of the year. But the negative is every minute that Buddy Hield's on the floor for a large part of it, that means that Benedict Mathurin is not. And Benedict Mathurin needs those minutes to develop. It seems like a catch-22 because they're closer than they thought right now, but their future still exists probably within the development of Mathurin. Your thoughts?
No, I think that's a perfect way to describe it. And I feel like the one thing that Buddy Hield does with that offense is he spreads the floor so well, and he's constantly moving off ball. Benedict Mathurin's not the same type of player. If Benedict Mathurin's not usually in an action, he's kind of just standing in the corner. And you know, he doesn't have the same type of off-ball movement that a Buddy Hield does, let alone the threat from shooting from distance. So I understand why Buddy Hield fits into the system, but he's been very inconsistent this year with his shooting numbers. And I know if you ask Rick Carlisle about it, he's going to tell you, you know, he's a pro. He's going to figure it out. And he kind of broke out of his slump last night. I think he went 6 of 9 against the Pistons. But he's been up and down this year. And defensively, he's gotten better, I would say, as a team defender. His passing has gotten better. He does make sense fit-wise. And you might even value his fit more than a Bruce Brown. But I just feel like they talked about how Ben Shepherd is very similar to Buddy Hield. And to me, that draft pick of Ben Shepherd was, okay, here's our Buddy Hield replacement in a couple of years. But at least I know with Ben Shepherd that he is an experienced college player, that it hopefully doesn't take him 2 or 3 years to really kind of get acclimated with the pace of the NBA. So I understand all the reasons why you wouldn't do it, especially the whole he's best friends with Tyrese Halliburton type thing. You have to consider that. But at the end of the day, if they can make a move that makes them better and it allows that space for Mathurin to maybe grow a little bit more, then I'm fine with trading Buddy Hield, even though I do value what he brings to the table.
You know, the thing that you brought up there within just prior to that point in talking about guys, and I agree with Hield about him spacing the floor. But I want to go back to also your comment about Walker. I know he's young, really young, but he does seem to have been brought in under the talking point that his area of skill set was the area that Indiana most covets right now, and that is physical defender. Why is he not on the floor?
Yeah, so from what I've seen when he's played is he's just very kind of erratic in terms of not staying within the system. There's been a lot of times where he'll break out of the system from their defensive scheme or what they're trying to do to gamble on a play, and then he gets burned. And I don't think offensively he's there yet with what they're trying to do. He's got great feel for the game, but he's not a great shooter. And it just kind of feels like, okay, if you play him with Miles, then you're probably going to see fives guarding Jarris Walker because he's not a good shooter, which also puts fours on Miles, which kind of takes away the advantage of having Miles play against fives where he can stretch the floor. So I just feel like maybe off the bench he could maybe get a little bit more run and get a little bit of a chance to kind of see what they can do. But right now they're in the process of trying to find the balance of developing players while also trying to win. And I think that his development is going to come, but it's going to come during practices. It's going to come during, playing in the G League and putting up good numbers there and just building the right habits. But right now I just don't think that they trust him enough to play within the scheme and the system that they want to play on a consistent basis. So I think that's why he's not getting those minutes. And at the same time, the guy that's playing those minutes he probably would be getting is Aaron Nesmith. And Aaron Nesmith has been so good this year, specifically playing that four, even though he's a little bit undersized. So I think right now, just having Toppin and Nesmith, those are just two guys Rick can trust a little bit more, and that's why Jarris isn't seeing the floor.
I'm a huge Alex Golden is our guest. I'm a huge Aaron Nesmith fan. Might even be, to be honest with you, uncomfortable for like a grown man to admire an NBA player like I do Aaron Nesmith. Is that weird?
I mean, I don't think anything's as bad as KB's admiration for Benedict Mathurin. So, I mean,
yeah, I'm not statue stage just yet. I'm not talking about building a statue for Aaron Nesmith, but I do love the thing I love about Aaron Nesmith is this. I just think every team needs an Aaron Nesmith. Like, I've mentioned this before, that Reggie Miller is still probably the biggest pillar in Pacers NBA franchise history, right? And Rick Smits was the guy that balanced that offensively. And in talking to the guy that built that franchise, he said to me, the most important player that we acquired was Dale Davis. I'm like, really? And he said, Dale Davis completely changed the trajectory of what we wanted to do in terms of our mindset, but he freed up everybody else to be in the spots they need to be. And I think that when Nesmith's on the floor, he's not doing the like tone setting that Dale Davis does, but he does little things, Alex, that then free up other players to do what they're out there specifically to do, and they don't have to worry about other things to help out when Nesmith's on the floor. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. No, it does. And just to kind of piggyback off that, I think he's fearless. And the ability to go in there and just get in LeBron's grill and just make it difficult for LeBron. LeBron, I mean, he had an okay game in that championship game. I mean, everyone's going to blow it up because they won the championship, right? But it was Anthony Davis that carried that team and Austin Reeves and what he did. But I thought Aaron Nesmith really kind of annoyed the crap out of LeBron for the entirety of the game when he was in there. And there's nobody else on this Pacers team that can even come close to doing what he does defensively, let alone the amount of hustle and energy that he plays with on a night-to-night basis. So you're right. He is a dog, and you need more guys like that on this team that are not afraid to kind of junk it up and go out there and do whatever is asked of them, because he could literally start on this team and I wouldn't have a problem with that. But he's okay with coming off the bench, and I think that kind of helps smooth things out because he has no ego. He just wants to win basketball games and do whatever he can to impact the game. So I love the way that Aaron Nesmith plays basketball, and I'm right there with you. Like, the more I watch him, I'm just like, we got such a bargain of a deal when they signed him to that 3-year extension. Like, people don't realize how valuable he is going to be to this team, especially when they make that run and start, winning playoff series here in the next 3 to 4 years. He's going to be a pivotal part of that, and I fully believe that he is the perfect fit for the Pacers.
I'll be honest. I wondered when I was watching, I think it was in the Boston game, I was watching Nesmith, Alex, and I thought to myself, I wonder if he regrets signing that extension when he did. Honestly,
yeah, he
because
probably does a little bit.
Right, because it would have increased now, right?
I would assume so. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't even think he really cares about money as much as maybe some people would. I think he's just happy to be in a situation where he feels like he's wanted and he can go out there and play basketball how he wants to play. And he didn't get paid like a cheap amount of money. Like he got $33 million, right? It's still a lot of money to these guys. It's life-changing money. It's a second contract. And had he stayed in Boston, would he have ever even gotten that kind of money? So probably a little bit of a hometown discount there just because the Pacers took a chance on him and gave him that opportunity. But, yeah, I mean, he might have maybe put a couple, $6-7 million extra on his contract had he waited till the end of the year.
Hey, Golden, even though Indiana, of course, made the magical run to the IST final, who knows if people across the NBA associate Indiana being just 2 games back of the Bucks, right, in the East. I mean, that's dwindling. So just looking at tomorrow's game, what's on your mind most, especially after the game against the Bucks here in Indianapolis?
Yeah, I mean, that's, the Bucks, the Pacers have beat them twice now this year. And I think there's 2 things the Bucks can do to kind of eliminate Indiana from really getting off and winning this game. Number one, they just give the ball to Giannis like they did the first time they played the Pacers when Giannis had 54 points. I feel like Giannis could have had the same type of game that Anthony Davis had against the Pacers had they fed him more, but their offense was kind of going through Dame and doing different things like that. I also think Damian Lillard's going to be a little bit fired up for this one after Tyrese Halliburton did the "it's my time now" kind of gave a little love to Damian Lillard by doing his signature sign of tapping the wrist. And then the other thing, everyone was talking about it, how Tyrese Halliburton just obliterated their pick and roll coverage. They had no answer for that. They threw a zone at the Pacers, and I felt like Nembhard and Bruce Brown really just kind of made them pay for that by getting open in the middle of that zone and just hitting that little 10 to 12-foot jumper there, and no defense was contesting it. So the Bucks have their hands full. They don't really have the personnel to defend the Pacers like they might want to, but I guarantee we will see different schemes on how they guard Tyrese Halliburton just because Halliburton was obliterating their pick and roll coverage. And anytime they can get Brook Lopez into a switch, he is so slow footed he cannot stay with Tyrese, and Tyrese will just cook him all day on that coverage. So I expect the Bucks to be a little bit more motivated. Just they've gotten kind of got embarrassed a couple different times by the Pacers. They were the team that was supposed to beat them. So I think that's kind of how you're going to see it. And then you have to wonder if the Pacers just another road game being on the road for so long, do they kind of just this fatigue finally hit them and make this a little bit more of a challenging game for them?
Alex, how often, if at all, do you, since they are now locally based, do you get to see the Mad Ants play, the G League team?
So a lot of their games are during the day when I'm at work, so I'm not able to check them out. But I have not been to a game yet this year, and I haven't really kept up. But I have seen that they're the number 1 team in the G League, and I think they've won like 10 or 11 in a row. So that's about the most I know about them.
I've wondered this. Are they going to change their name from Mad Ants? Because they're named the Mad Ants after, Fort Wayne. They were the Fort Wayne Mad Ants. So do they change the name? What do they do there?
Yeah, I think it was after Mad Anthony Wayne, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And so they're going to Noblesville. I would assume they changed their name. I know a lot of people in Fort Wayne were upset when they left, but I understand the logistics of why they did because Noblesville is a much closer drive than Fort Wayne is. So, and maybe a little bit more scenic too than just taking 69 all the way. But I don't know what they're going to change the name to. I think that they should just ask fans to kind of throw out some ideas there and maybe come up with something interesting. But the Mad Ants, it's a unique name. It's one that I think that it just kind of rolls up the tongue when you're saying the Fort Wayne Mad Ants, but Indiana Mad Ants does not really go together.
When I was a kid, Noblesville, I don't know if they still do this, but Noblesville, their high school is the Millers. And if you lived in Noblesville, people would get bumper stickers that say, "Follow the Millers." And when I was a kid, I thought everybody that lived in Noblesville's last name was Miller because we were always behind them in the car. And I'm like, we're following the Millers. Like there are Millers all over the place in this town, right? But they can't call them the Indiana Millers because that's what Noblesville is. And that's unfair to the rest of the area, right?
I mean, unless they're paying like an homage to them and just like it's a respect.
What's the most famous thing in Noblesville? I mean, you got Deer Creek, right, or whatever it's called now, right?
Yeah.
Ruoff. You can't call them the Indiana Ruoffs. What else could you come up with?
I don't really live on that side of town, so I would have no idea.
Is IKEA in Noblesville or Fishers?
That's a great question.
I think that's Fishers.
I think that's Fishers, yeah.
That would have been a good one, huh?
That would have been a good one, yeah. You got Topgolf right across the street.
The Indiana
right?
Swedish meatballs?
The Indiana, what's this extra screw, right? Yeah. actually, the most famous thing to happen in Noblesville is probably when they had the Deer Creek Grateful Dead riots in like 92, I think it was, 93, something like that. They just call them the riots, the Deadhead Riots. How's that? That's an awesome team name. Just the Deadheads. What about the Deadheads?
Sounds pretty legit. Sounds a little scary, a little intimidating.
Hey, lastly, what do you want to see, Alex, from Indiana coming off of, like, there was so much positive vibe, energy coming off of the in-season tournament and growth, really. And I think it was really good for them to see defensively what happens when teams turn up the wick when there are things at stake. You know, $500,000 at stake, you saw what happens defensively. And I thought L.A. was really aggressive defensively, and it was good for Indiana to learn that. But if the Pacers have taken a step in the last month, what do they need to do to show that that step is in fact solidified and it was not a fleeting fad because of the fact that they were caught up in the tournament?
Yeah, I think they really just need to focus in on, like, what got them there, right? What made them get up for these games was they were still trying to prove to everybody that they belong. They had a chip on their shoulder, and they were playing with an edge. And I think if they can approach the rest of the season like that, every game is a prove-it game to the rest of the league that wasn't a fluke. They are going to be looked at with a different lens now just because they got to this point. But if they are to stumble again and go on a big losing streak and really fail to compete with some of the upper echelon teams of the NBA, people are going to say, okay, that was just a silly little run they had back in December. They're not a serious team. But I think if they want to take that next step, they just need to continue, honing in on the fact that, okay, we proved to the world that we belonged here. Let's continue proving to the world that, we're not satisfied with where we're at now. And I think Miles Turner had a great quote when asked about being, highlighted on First Take, saying, like, that's cute and all, but we want bigger things to happen with this team. We want more national recognition for the way we play, and that's what's going to get us on national TV. So I think that's the main thing for me is just, like, learning how to, okay, it's a different field. You're not getting up for these games because they don't count as much, but it still counts towards your 82-game regular season schedule. And you have this opportunity to kind of prove to everybody that you belong. So that for me is what I'm most hopeful to see is just like, can they keep up now that they've got this semi-target on their back a little bit more than they had before? Can they play at that high level? And also, can they just beat the teams that they're supposed to beat? We've seen that happen too many times this year where they lose to teams that they should have beaten, like a Charlotte, like a Chicago, like a Portland. They can't let those games slip away from them. They have to take care of business against the teams that are lesser than them and that aren't on their same level, because that's what's going to separate them from being a playoff team versus a play-in team.
Alex, I have not yet seen, and I don't know if you have, television numbers for the championship game on Saturday night, because I'm curious. It's been a long time, guys, and I know, I remember during some of the great playoff runs the Pacers had where the phrase around town was simply, what are you doing for the game? And everyone knew what you were talking about. And that's what it was like Saturday night. I mean, it was like, what are you doing for the game? What are you going to watch the game? And I'm curious if that was true outside of the Indianapolis market. Eddie, do you have the ratings you said?
Yes, per Clutch Sports, it averaged 4.58 million viewers on ABC and ESPN2. That is the most watched non-Christmas NBA game during the regular season in 6 years.
So there, Alex, mission accomplished, right? Because wasn't the goal here to let the goal was to let the guy on his couch in Council Bluffs, Iowa, or in Galveston, Texas, know that the NBA does play before Christmas, right?
Yeah, and I think the in-season tournament did its job, right? I had people asking me left and right that I work with. They know I do a podcast. I know I talk about the Pacers, but they don't really say much to me throughout the season. But as soon as they started making the tournament and they were like, man, the Pacers are in Vegas, that's really cool. Like, what's going on? Like, I started getting all these questions to me, like, what's happening? And I do think that it did spark the interest of people for the month of December. And that's exactly what you want to see from the NBA. And let's be honest, LeBron being in there, the Lakers being in there for the championship, that did probably help increase the numbers because it's a huge market. But at the same time, I think that getting that established with LeBron in there and letting people know what it's about and how, that game was pretty competitive for the most part. I mean, the Pacers hung in there for the majority of the game, even though they never really had a lead really in that game. I think that people are going to be more excited about it moving forward. And then the way LeBron and Anthony Davis kind of celebrated afterwards, they're hanging the banner, they're popping champagne. I think that kind of sets the precedent for what to expect moving forward for other teams. So I definitely think that it did what it was supposed to do, and I really enjoyed it. I think they did a great job of making basketball interesting in November and December.
It actually, for me, was a reminder of like, oh, yeah, like the Pelicans are able to play well when Zion's there. Honestly, and I don't even mean that flippantly, just because that's a franchise you don't hear as much about, right? And you've got to, it's got to remind you that that probably is the mentality about Indiana by a lot of Western Conference markets that may not pay attention throughout the course of certainly the regular season when it comes to the Eastern Conference. Again, Alex Golden at Alex Golden NBA on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Alex, appreciate the time.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. You know, Eddie, people have been writing in all over the place about this white-winged dove, and somebody made a good point to me. They said, wouldn't a one-winged dove just fly in a circle? Now, would a one-winged dove fly in a circle, or would it just not be able to fly?
It would be like...
Depends on how strong that wing is.
It depends on which, and it probably depends on which side of the wing, which side the wing is, right?
You and your little hands.
If Kenny Pickett, if he was a dove, right? But
is it his dominant wing?
Right. Like what would it?
See,
I'm telling you, I can't.
He's a southpaw.
I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one with the Stevie Nicks song that thought it was the one-winged dove. It doesn't sound like white-winged dove, does it?
I've personally never heard of one wing. I've always heard white-winged, but
actually,
audio quality is
now that we're
better
down on
in
the
my
same floor as the
generation than
WIBC kids.
when it
They
came out.
prefer to it as the right-winged dove. Actually, is what I understand, right?
Okay.
But I'm telling you, it's white-winged dove, right?
Yes.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm getting it clear.
Want to cut heating bills without cutting comfort? Lower utility costs.
Just injuries in the National Football League, Brennan. And there's a guy that is out for the year that, and it's almost fitting the franchise that he plays for. And let me explain. There are certain players that you know are great players. And almost their reputation like precedes them in the fact that you go into a game and you're like, this team's going to have a chance to win because this guy is on the roster as the quarterback. And he has capability of being dynamic. And then you look at the record of the team and you're like, what is it that's missing? Because he's throwing for a lot of yards and touchdowns and he makes plays and he's got all the size and all the tools and all the skills, but yet they seem to continuously fall short of where you think they're going to be. And the guy that there are a number of players over the course of the National Football League that applies to. A guy that was an absolutely tremendous talent that was part of a dynamic offense that threw for a ton of yards and scored a ton of points was Dan Fouts. and Air Coryell and the guys that he was throwing it around to, I mean, Charlie Joyner and, obviously Kellen Winslow, and I think he had Wes Chandler for a few years. John Jefferson was a great player. But yet, in Fouts, they certainly had good success, did the Chargers, but they never got – they had a great disco song, by the way, San Diego Chargers disco song. We could deviate from the Bird songs, Eddie, if you can find the San Diego Chargers disco song, because it is – I mean, you want to talk about just flat-out awesome songs.
That was their touchdown song?
You didn't even acknowledge the fact that I played When Doves Cry by
fight
Prince.
Song. Well,
so I wasn't playing a Bird song next anyway.
No, you have to now, but you got to play the San Diego Chargers song. But the Chargers are that franchise that, like, they're always right. You feel like they're better than they are. Then you look at it and you go, and Justin Herbert seems to kind of fit that mold because he's got a super strong arm. He's athletic. He extends plays. He's dynamic. He throws for great numbers. Maybe it's because they're no longer the San Diego Chargers and they can't play the awesome song. Maybe that's it, right? Why they're not there. But he is now, we now know, and the Chargers were fading pretty quickly anyway, but earlier news today about Justin Herbert, right?
Yeah, out for the season. And like you said, I mean, their hopes had dwindled all the way down, even though they're a confusing team. I mean, Eckler was out for a while, obviously, to begin the year. They've just never had any juice. I mean, Staley, they've been calling for him to be fired for what feels like forever now. And it seems like that's inevitable by now, right, with Staley?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard enough because the Chargers now, I mean, the Chargers were always kind of, I hate to say it, a second-rate franchise in Southern California. When they were in San Diego, they were obviously massively popular in San Diego, but they were still always kind of a second fiddle to the L.A. market. Even when the Rams had gone, when L.A. didn't have a team, people in L.A., I think, it was still thought of as, but the conversation about L.A. and the NFL was constantly what team's going to move there. You know what I mean? And so as a result of that, they were always kind of a backseat. Now they go to L.A. itself, and you still forget they're the L.A. Chargers, right?
Absolutely.
Because you think of them, of course, as this. I mean, now you want to talk about just kick-ass music. Here we go right here. I mean, how can you not love this, right?
You got like 20 seconds of walk-up, so you can talk for a little bit.
This was their touchdown song?
No, this is just their theme song, fight song. This is when everybody was trying to cash in on the disco craze, right? I mean, get out your leisure suit, baby. Now, hold on. What team we talking about? San Diego Superchargers. I mean, come on, baby. Can't you just picture a bunch of people in leisure suits sitting around? They got big headphones on at a party. And they're just like, pass around the goods, baby. I mean, look, Eddie's popping. You don't want to admit it's great, do you?
It's got a nice beat. Very catchy.
Now,
can we remix this and make this your theme song for the show?
You tell me which is better. We got that one, right? Then you got the Cincinnati Bengals song. So we got to find the Cincinnati Flatulent Bengals song because teams do this, right? Everybody. This is what the Colts need, and I know people have tried it. There's always a couple of guys like in a garage somewhere in like Mars Hill that are putting together some bad Colts song. Don't try. I mean, you can't compete with this. Here's the Bengals right here, right? Is this the Bengals, Eddie?
The Bengal crawling, mean and angry, here he comes a crawling.
Oh, you know this one?
And hungry and offensive brutes, run past the boots, and defensively he's rough, tough, Cincinnati Bengals.
He's a little gas, is what he is, right?
We're gonna cheer to victory. Touchdown Bengals.
Now, the creme de la creme, though. The creme de la creme, and this always makes Eddie White mad because I think he thinks that this song that I'm about to mention was stolen from the Miami Dolphins. But the Houston Oilers have the greatest of all time in these songs, right? And the only reason we're doing this is because anytime that there's news about the Chargers, it allows me to play the great disco song of the Chargers. But then that segues into these fabulous songs. This is what the NFL is all about. This is when football was football, baby.
Now,
when
I know those lyrics,
like
Brendan, because it played like 3 times on
That's
Sunday.
Right.
And I've been to
Paycor.
Paycor 4 times in the last year and a half. So I know that by
That's fair. Well,
now.
Olivia probably makes you know it, right?
Okay, here we go.
The 20th Century Fox.
Here we come, Houston Oilers, number 1.
Now, I went to Super Bowl 34 in Atlanta between the Tennessee Titans and the St. Louis Rams. Day first, stands up in the middle of a restaurant amongst all Titans fans and starts singing this song. And, like, literally, I mean, there might have been a few beverages consumed, right? And then all of a sudden, everybody, here we go. Because we're the first is leading this with all these Tennessee Titans fans, many of which became Titans fans like 2 years prior, right? But all of a sudden, they're all up, and the ones that had Houston roots are singing the song, and we overtook the Atlanta airport. And then that was fun for like an hour. And then somebody's like, did you hear what just happened down in Buckhead with apparently one of the Ravens players? And that was the Ray Lewis situation, and then everybody just went home, and that was the end of that.
Oh, boy.
But it was fun nonetheless. So of those three, best song?
Oh, the Chargers.
Now, we're not going to play Ked Woodley and the Carolina Panthers song from a few years ago.
Do we have to play Miami now?
Okay.
Is Eddie White going to call you?
Play the Miami one. Play Miami and tell me if you think they ripped off, which one ripped off who. You ready? Again.
Miami has the Dolphins, the greatest football team. We take the ball from goal to goal like no one's ever seen.
The Houston folk might have stolen this, right? Right?
When you say Miami, you're talking Super Bowl 'cause we're the
100%. They couldn't even change the lyrics.
This is a more blatant ripoff than the Huey Lewis, Ray Parker Jr. has nothing on that kind of ripoff, right? That was terrible. But which one was first, though? Were the Oilers first or the Dolphins first?
Chicken or the egg?
Let's do some research.
I'm guessing, based on the sound, that Dolphins song sounds early 70s. I'm going to say 71, 72. And the Oilers song, I'm going to say, is like 77. So I'm going to say that the copyright infringement probably was by the Houston Oilers. I mean, they were running around with Earl Campbell, and matter of fact, they broke out that song in mass. Here's my theory. And guys, this is the kind of historical neuroticism that you have free access to. I'll bet what happened. The Dolphins had that song, okay? I'm going to say the Dolphins came out with that song around the time of the undefeated season, which, if you forget that the Dolphins are the last undefeated team, just ask them. And then, in 1978, the Houston Oilers hosted a Monday Night Football game that was Earl Campbell's breakout party. Earl Campbell ran for like 140 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game against the Miami Dolphins. I'm going to wager that the song we heard from the Houston Oilers was put together by a radio station in Houston to replicate the Miami Dolphins in anticipation of their big Monday Night Football, Dandy Don Meredith, Frank Gifford, Howard Cosell broadcast at the Astrodome. That's my guess. Eddie, able to find anything there?
Not yet. There's a lot of things you have to sift through, including all of those things from last night at Miami losing to the Tennessee Titans.
Jake, I'll tell you what, when the aliens someday come to Earth, I think we should send you to teach them about our customs. I think you'd be the perfect guy. I think you'd be the perfect guy.
They would be completely confused. They'd be like, well, first off, they would say, they would be like, yeah, all we know on planet Earth is they have apparently one-winged doves that fly around. And that's what we were passing.
Every professional sports franchise has a song.
I'm telling you, like, everybody does have a song, right? And this is the problem. This is the problem with – problem is the wrong word. I appreciate the enthusiasm. But all of these people – like, I wish I had $1 when I worked at Channel 6 for everybody that sent me a song about the Colts that they produced.
All right, what did you say for the Dolphins? When do you think it was released?
I'm going to say 71 or 72 for the Dolphins.
I wish I had a ding because you are correct.
Really?
1972 is when that one was released.
Okay, now, the Oilers song, I'm going to predict, I believe it was the 78 season, so it may have been like October of 77 when they hosted the Monday night game. But I'll bet you that song was done to kind of poke fun at Miami. And because Earl Campbell had such a breakout night on that game on Monday Night Football, they used that song, and so therefore it became bigger than the Dolphins song. That's my prediction.
Okay, I'm trying to find out when the Oilers released theirs now, because now I'm getting a history lesson on just the Houston Oilers in general.
Well, now what lesson would there be?
Oh, when they were founded, and there's this Love You Blue song by the Houston.
Love You Blue. That, again, same thing, right?
1975 in the regard for that one.
Yeah, the Love You Blue is also a great song. Okay, wait, Love You Blue is the same thing, isn't it? Now that I think about it?
I've got no idea.
Okay. Well, these are the kind of things we probably should have had a meeting before the show, right? But anyway, so Justin Herbert out for the year. That basically, I'm allowing Eddie to continue to look for the Houston Oilers information. But the Justin Herbert news is not huge, except for it does have some implication, possibly, because that's the final blow. That's another team that you can eliminate out. But the record alone pretty much eliminated the Chargers out of the AFC wildcard contention, right?
Absolutely.
But they have games remaining against the teams the Colts are fighting with, right?
Oh, they can play some major spoiler. I was going to say, what'd you say that was? Love Me Blue?
Love You Blue.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, did that have any relation to Jackie Moon's Love Me Sexy?
Love You Blue, that was minor league basketball, was it not?
Yeah.
So We're the Houston Oilers was released in 1978.
Does it say when?
Does not say the exact time. It just says 1978.
Congratulations, Jake Query.
Thank you.
You get an unlimited selection from Scotty
20th,
Johnston's trash bin.
On November 20th, 1978, the Oilers took on the Miami Dolphins on Monday Night Football. In order to boost team spirit, the Oilers gave each person in the stands a blue and white pom-pom for over $50,000 to wave while playing the song.
Of course, this is the one time where we need Eddie White to text us, and he's probably not listening.
No, Eddie's always listening.
It's like the Emperor.
We mentioned earlier some of the teams that the Colts are going to have to slug out with for a playoff spot, assuming that they're going to be in the wild card and not the division. Although Jacksonville is backpedaling a little bit. The problem with Jacksonville is the fact, Brendan, that they own the tiebreaker because they swept the Colts. And so as a result of that, it's going to be tough because with 4 to go, you're basically 2 games back, right? And let's look at Jacksonville's remaining schedule, because if you look, the Colts' schedule is pretty favorable. The Jaguars' remaining schedule: Baltimore. So now all of a sudden you're tied, but not really, because so you still got another game to make up. Jacksonville after that, at Tampa, Carolina, and at Tennessee.
Wow.
It's going to be tough for them to get 2 losses out of those 4, right?
Yeah, unless Levis pulls a Houston Texans from last year, you know.
Tell you what, Levis, how about Levis last night?
He could play.
He played well, right? And he had Levis last night extended plays. I thought he showed some moxie for sure. You know, he had a leadership about him. What Levis is doing right now is what was not done before him. Because a year ago, look, I think that everybody knew that Tennessee was preparing for, obviously, the handover from Ryan Tannehill. And Malik Willis was a guy that got the same opportunities a year ago in big moments. He just didn't seize them. And what Will Levis is doing is kind of seizing the moment, right? He's taking advantage of it in the fact that he's clearly playing well. I mean, not like knock your socks off well, but last night was impressive, though.
It was. Again, I like how he leads that team, and it's nice to have a Derrick Henry with you, right? But at the same time, I think a lot of that hinges on what's going to happen with Mike Vrabel if the rumors are true. And it's a domino effect, right? Because what happens with Vrabel, if the rumors are true that he's interested in New England, Belichick would have to get fired. So,
I believe that is all coming from New England. Didn't we have somebody recently, Jake, talk about that on our airwaves? I can't remember which guest when we had the Titans a couple weeks ago, was asked, I think by Jimmy, if Mike Vrabel would leave Tennessee to go to New England.
Well, there was a lot of discussion about the fact that he was the heir apparent, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
And I believe that is all. I believe our guest said that's all smoke from Tennessee, or from New England specifically, not anything in Tennessee is being discussed in that nature.
Well, that might be the word. I believe that's correct. That the speculation came from the Patriots side of coverage, right? And that with Belichick, that if he were to retire or to leave or whatever else, that Vrabel is the guy that Robert Kraft would go after. And then, that becomes, would Vrabel leave Tennessee to go there? Who knows in those regards. There are so many things that go into whether or not a guy would leave, what the situations. I mean, everything down, guys, to do they have kids in school? Do they have, where's the wife's family from? Where's the guy from? Where's the, what's the background of where the guy is from? There are a million factors that go into it, right? Money is, at some point, and I know it sounds crazy, but at some point, you have enough money that, like, is there really, that's almost embarrassing to say, is there a huge issue difference between $6 to $8 million a year if you've already netted 40 in the bank? I mean, I guess there is when you start talking about generational wealth and making sure that you have money to pass along and those kinds of things. It all has to come into play. But I think that sometimes we get caught up in, every person would want to go to this franchise, or who wouldn't want to live in that market? Well, there's a lot that goes into that, right? I mean, Brendan, you're an aspiring baseball broadcaster, right? And if you were the voice of give me a major league team off the top of your head.
Tampa Bay Rays.
Tampa Bay Rays. You move down to Tampa, and while you're there, end up getting married, and you marry a girl from St. Pete, and you have children, and they're in the 7th and 9th grade, and then all of a sudden the White Sox come calling. I'm not saying you wouldn't take it because home is home, but you would probably have to think about it and have the discussion a lot longer than you would if that situation came up right now.
100%.
You know what I mean? There's just a ton that goes into it.
Say hello to the power, performance, and precision of Ram.
JB has walked in.
I'm here. I spilled coffee in my crotch right before I walked in here.
That's like the third time you've done that.
Yeah, I didn't know. At first, I thought maybe I peed my pants because it was warm, too. I didn't know. But I think I spilled coffee on my crotch.
You didn't feel it when it first
No,
hit
I was
you?
sitting there talking to those guys out there. I was kind of sitting in the pseudo bullpen out there, and all of a sudden I felt this warm feeling on my lower genitalia. And
Okay.
yeah, it was either one.
You still got half a cup left, though.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it wasn't a lot.
Do you make the coffee here? Do we have a coffee maker?
I normally do, but they had some out there, so I like mine leaded. You know what I mean? I don't go to Starbucks or any of these places. I go and get mine at the gas station, where I know that they took about 2 seconds to make it.
And the best gas station coffee is where? I hear McDonald's has great coffee.
You know,
My mom loves that.
I would say Casey's General Store normally, but the one I go to on Madison, they need to get with the program here and get some more supplies. So that's not been favorable.
Do you get pizza while you're there?
Sometimes Blake does. We stop every morning. We stop either there or Speedway every morning.
Mm-hmm.
And,
I have enough Speedy Reward points for Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, well, we could put ours together and probably buy a Speedway. Seriously.
How many do you have?
Or 7-Eleven,
How many do you have? Let's see what I have right now. What do you have?
I don't even know. I just have a card I hand to him, and I don't even know what it is. But it's substantial. I know that.
I've never cashed them in.
Yeah,
because I keep thinking to myself, I'm like with Speedy Reward points what Chris Ballard is with salary cap. I'm going to need that someday. I'm going to need it someday, right?
I think I get a free one like every week. That's how often I'm in there.
I like it. Here's the thing I like is when they go, do you have if I don't have my card on me and the guy scans his, like the clerk like scans one, act like he's doing you a favor. I'm like, that guy's probably sitting on like 900,000 points, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the only reason I know is because they tell me. They go, wow, you got a lot of points and everything here. See, you keep track of your Walton's clock up here? It's like that's how the Waltons told time back in 1930.
So for people that don't know, in this new studio, we have a clock on the wall that's like, it's like the clock you had in school, right?
Yeah.
The problem is from where I sit, we have one large spotlight.
Yeah.
And for me to look at the clock, I have to turn my head in the direction of the spotlight, and it completely blinds me, and I can't see anything. So, like, I can't see you right now at all.
Really?
No, you're just a figure.
Well, that's good, too, because you guys were talking earlier. I couldn't hear anything you guys said.
Well, it's good because he's got coffee on his shorts, too.
I'm deaf, and I got a crotch full of hot coffee.
No, you said that you drink your coffee leaded, but that looks like it's got cream and sugar in it.
Oh, there might be a little bit in there right now. Normally I do. So, yeah, there's some kind of...
Do you go with, like, the flavoring? Hazelnut?
I can,
that kind of thing?
yeah. I like, I don't know what, the peppermint flavor. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll get black coffee and drop, like, a peppermint down in there.
You know who, lastly, and J&V is going to be up next. We'll preview what you got coming up here in just a second. I just thought of this. I just had a moment of clarity that came to me. People tell you all the time that you look like the fella from, what's the band, Rascal Flatts?
Yeah, they also tell me I look like the fat guy in Teen Wolf.
You have the hair of that guy, right? But you're not, he's fat, you're not.
They all say I look like the fat guy in Teen Wolf.
But one of these, as you turn sideways, one just hit me. You kind of look like Michael Rappaport.
Really? Cool. You know, this is a true story, and I really embraced it. I remember back when I was in high school, people told me I looked like Emilio Estevez.
Really?
They called me Estevez. I go, that's cool right there.
Yeah.
I'll take Emilio Estevez. I'd much rather have that than the fat guy from Teen Wolf. Who also played John Wayne Gacy in the film, too.
He also played, as you and I have talked about, he also played the guy that got in the fight over the
Francis.
The Babka in Seinfeld. And Francis, yes.
He played.
Great character actor, right?
Yes.
What do you got upcoming on the program, John?
I think Miles Turner. Eddie told me Miles Turner. I had no idea. He's going to call in at 3:15. I think Greg Rakestraw is going to be here. Blah, 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 blah. What else?
Brad
Spielberger. And then Daenerys going to be big numbers, by the way, on Saturday night. Big television ratings numbers.
Right?
Yeah.
We were just talking about that.
So good for that.
So Miles Turner is on, and then
yes,
you caught heat over him the other day, right?
Yeah. Every time he has a bad game.
But
so
you never,
Saturday,
but
Saturday when he didn't play well, then everybody started talking about he just left and went to the locker room.
But what about when he was like not single-handedly, but a huge part of what they
because they're wussies. You don't hear from him then, but you don't hear from him when he plays well. You only hear from him when they play.
It's never people on the X Twitter that use their actual names or photo, is it?
No, I call them out if they do, so I wouldn't if I were them. So I say, you know what? And I'm cool with, like, I'll be critical, and I was critical yesterday, but I'm also fair. I think we sit here, we need to be fair and impartial about this, and I'm really fair about it. Normally the critique that comes in regarding Miles, he's much different than anybody else. It is always his fault. It's never anybody else's if they have a bad game. It's always his fault. So, you know, I have been a defender for a number of years. That's one of the reasons.
Do you think you get criticism from the same person's burner accounts that gets me?
Probably.
You think that's
yeah.
right?
Or just Nimrods in general.
Certain things kind of give it away. All right, so Miles Turner on today, right? In about 20 minutes?
3:15, yeah.
All right, about 20 minutes. Miles Turner with John. He's up next. We'll be back with you at noon tomorrow.
The speed, the power, the high-octane fury.